Good morning, everyone. Johanna, I want to just check and see if you are in the Zoom room.
Johanna, I heard you or saw you unmute. I did not get audio on your side. Oh, she might be having an issue with her microphone.
Okay, let's see. I just want to check and make sure that we have Legistar working. Let's see if she has it playing.
Okay, it's 9 o'clock. Are we ready? Does everybody feel ready?
I'm just confirming Granicus here. Once I have it confirmed.
Okay, I'm going to use my phone because I think I need to update my desktop audio.
Okay, we hear you now. Thank you.
Okay. I'm just not getting a confirmation on Granicus.
Live Manager has been started, so it should be going.
Okay, I'm just confirming. If there's anyone else that can confirm it, this is not showing that it's, I'm not getting it up on this tablet.
Stand by, I'm checking here.
Thank you.
Didn't realize we had a...
This one's just scrolling.
A hole now. Took it out.
So if anyone could confirm Granicus, that would be great. There we go, finally.
Says it's in progress.
Okay, that's
Gotta
more
throw
than
something
I
at you,
have.
but I warn you.
And it says it's live,
Do you see an image?
and I can hear you talking on it. I don't
Okay.
see anything. It still says Board of Supervisors on the logo, but I
Yes,
turned on the
then
sound and I heard you.
That's more than I'm seeing. So if you can hear it and you can see the logo, then we're good.
And I'll let
Okay.
you know if the camera changes.
Thank you.
Never changed.
Okay, Chair Crandall, we are ready.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the February 15th regular Board of Supervisors meeting. And I'd like to start off with, we'll call the meeting to order, of course, and start off with a moment of silence. And we have a moment of silence for Kyle Shasteen, an employee, and I'd like to give the floor to Director Scott DeLeon.
And Mr. Chair, if you can give us just a minute, we have a photo to post and then direct.
And we're going to put up a photo.
So Matthew, if you would, there we go.
There we go.
Thank you.
All right.
Great. Good morning, board. Yeah, this is a second week in a row that I've come to your board to request a dedication, and it'll be okay with me if I never have to do this again, but unfortunately, I do need to request that you dedicate this morning's moment of silence to Kyle Shasteen. Kyle was a member of the Upper Lake Road crew, and he unexpectedly passed away last week. Kyle was hired as a maintenance worker in the road department in August of 2020, and he was working his way up the ladder in our organization. He had obtained his Class A driver's license, and he was working on learning how to operate the various pieces of equipment we use. And as you can see in the picture that we provided, it shows Kyle working on Elk Mountain Road in one of our graders. When talking with his coworkers about Kyle, the words cheerful, positive, and dependable are used pretty frequently. Our road crews work together through really challenging conditions, and they become a family, and Kyle was certainly a beloved member of the Upper Lake crew. Kyle was a collegiate football player, and as I understand it, he played for Missouri State and achieved All-American honors. He was also an avid outdoorsman. He will be greatly missed by our entire department, and on behalf of the Department of Public Works, I offer his family and friends our deepest condolences. Thank you.
All right. Supervisor Sabatier, can you lead us in the pledge, please?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We'll move on to item 4, consideration of extra items not appearing on the posted agenda. CEO Hutchinson?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I do expect to have an extra agenda item that I'll bring forth a little later in the meeting. Since you have folks here waiting for timed items, we can work on that after the timed items are complete, if that works for you.
That works for me. So we'll just come back to this after, a little later.
Yes.
So we'll move on to item 5 and come back to item 4 later. Approval of the consent agenda. Consent agenda items are usually non-controversial items that we pass in one motion. However, if somebody desires to pull from the Board of Supervisors or from the public, free to do so as of now. So is there anything anyone would like to pull? Supervisor Sabatier?
Yeah, I'd like to ask some questions for item 5.1 and also pull for clarification and correction on item 5.9.
5.1 and 5.9. Anyone from the public? I don't see anybody in the chambers, and it's not looking like I have anyone on Zoom. So we'll bring it back for action.
Mr. Chair, I move to approve consent agenda items 5.2 to 5.8 and 5.10.
Does I have a motion? Second. And I have a second. Johanna, can you please conduct the roll call?
Okay, Supervisor Simon,
Yes.
Supervisor Sabatier,
Aye.
Supervisor Scott,
Aye.
Supervisor Pyska,
Yes.
and Supervisor Crandall.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. We'll move on to public input. This is for the public to discuss anything that's not covered on the agenda, and note that we, as the board, will not address any of your items brought to this comment section unless it's put on the agenda. And if you're discussing something that's on the agenda, I will do my best to guide you to another agenda item that may be covered later. So if I'm cutting you off in this realm, it's not because I don't want you to speak, it's because I think there's a time you can probably fit your discussion into another agenda item. So we'll go ahead and open it up for public input. Is there anyone in the chambers? I'm not seeing anyone, so go to Zoom. I have someone on the Zoom phone 4627. If you can unmute, you have 3 minutes.
Good morning, everybody. This is Tom Slate with a short piece to read. I would like to speak to what happened at last week's meeting, public input. I found out after the meeting that my call was very, very broken. It was from my home on a phone that is virtually never a problem. I hope Eddie did not cut the microphone. There is, of course, a switch the chair has, or at least used to have, that can cut the microphone to the video recording broadcast. Mic cutting has happened to me before, January 10th, 2012. The chairman cut the mic while I was speaking respectfully. I did not know at the time. The PA system sound in the room was not affected. The video record shows me speaking and then silence as I continued. The recording shows the video technician, normally located in a booth at the back of the room, hurriedly approaching the chair, chairman, apparently concerned about the loss of sound. The chair, of course, fully aware, simply waved him off, dismissed him. The video record shows the chair passing a note to the supervisor on his right. Several supervisors appear to be quite amused about something. Wonder what that could be. I have the video, but also an email confirmation from a Lake County government source that yes, indeed, the mic had been cut. Last week, though, was the worst supervisor meeting I've ever seen. The chairman expressed rude, defensive, and angry behavior. It was only public input, for God's sakes, instantly cutting the mic at 3 minutes while the callers were still speaking without the normal customary notice to complete the thought, then stop. It is common courtesy. One caller was, based on the video record, cut after 2 minutes and 20 seconds. This behavior is scandalous in my opinion, but from my extensive experience in Lake County, not surprising at all. The chair was breaking a fundamental rule not to comment and editorialize, interrupted with a 37-second non sequitur distraction that had nothing to do with the concerns and potentially life-saving COVID information expressed once again by the callers. People are dead, people are dying. The last I heard, people on vents. There's much credible information available to conclude that some, possibly most of this, could have been prevented. Yet disrespecting and verbally attacking the callers continues at supervisor meetings. The last I heard, Eddie's mom was on a vent. Whatever the situation now, if it's not too late, I wish her well, of course. God bless Eddie's mom. God forgive you, Eddie. Shame on you. That goes for all of you. Wake up.
Just want to make sure you're finished. And my hands are on the table, so I'm not cutting you off.
That's fine.
Okay.
I'm done.
Okay. Thank you for your comments. Greatly appreciate them. And we didn't cut you off last week, and we wouldn't do that. So thank you. Supervisor Sabatier?
I just want to say I have no knowledge of any button at the chair level that controls the audio. There is absolutely zero controls other than your own microphone in front of you.
So it's fine. They're allowed to project or whatever the case may be. It's fine. So next, it looks like we have Julia Bono. Julia Bono, please unmute, and you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, sir. My name is Julia Bono. I have background and degrees in scientific research. I wanted to speak to the board and its audience today about the harms caused by the currently available COVID-19 vaccines that have been reported to the CDC's Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System, or VAERS database, and they're summarized on a page called Open VAERS. Since many of these are severe harms associated with COVID vaccination, healthcare providers are legally required to report them, although some official estimates like the Lazarus report suggest that as few as 1% of adverse events are actually reported. The latest VAERS data through February 4th, 2022 shows that there have been a total of 23,615 deaths, 127,855 hospitalizations, 118,076 urgent care reports, 171,408 doctor's office visits, 9,119 anaphylaxis events, 13,784 Bell's palsy events, including someone I know personally. There's also 3,991 miscarriages, 12,069 heart attacks, including my sister-in-law, 32,432 myocarditis pericarditis events, 42,260 permanently disabled individuals, 5,551 thrombocytopenia, low platelet events, 26,836 life-threatening events, 39,440 severe allergic reactions, and 12,346 shingles. All vaccine-related, to put this in perspective, all vaccine-related deaths reported in 2021 were just 421. That is for all vaccines, while this year has already seen reports of over 23,000 vaccine-related deaths, and it's far from over. With respect to the time frame from COVID vaccination to death, the substantial majority of cases died within 2 days of vaccination. I also, my emphatic contention is that based on the data, is that these experimental COVID vaccines should not be misrepresented to the public as safe, nor should members of the public be encouraged, pressured, and/or mandated to take these vaccines if they prefer not to and are understandably concerned about adverse vaccine events versus the risk of actually getting COVID, which is asymptomatic to mild in the vast majority of cases and hardly ever fatal among minors. And that particularly applies to the current strain, the current Omicron strain. I further contend that virtually everyone already knows that COVID vaccines exist, so if they have not taken one by this point, they probably don't want to. Finally, and this is where I really require a response from the Board of Supervisors. I have brought to this Board of Supervisors' attention via email, certified mail, and in these Zoom calls, the severe election irregularities that occurred on January 13th at Middletown Area Town Hall mass meeting, but I have yet to receive a response. I ask again, before this board, in public, has my complaint been received, and when will it be responded to? Thank you.
Thank you. Just making sure that you don't have anything else to say. I know she said thank you, but being extra cautious. There we go, it's the 3 minutes. All right, so that's the, we have one last person, and Nikki Hind, apparently Dr. Nikki Hind. And Nikki, can you elaborate what your field is in with your doctorate before you start?
Hi, my name is Nikki Hines, and I hope you're not including this in my 3 minutes.
No, I'm not. Just want to know.
Graduated from Stanford University with a Doctor of Musical Arts, 1997.
Okay, excellent. So now you're
1998, I'm sorry, 1998 it was.
Okay, that's nice to know. Thank you. You can start now, and we'll give you your 3 minutes.
My name is Nikki Hind. As I was saying last week, the board's COVID proclamations and mandates are not like any other business item. And let me just say that regarding all the other business this board conducts, I have no problem. In fact, I applaud the supervisor's work. This does not mean I agree with everything, but I am happy to let the supervisors do the work for which they were duly elected. And I'll just add that I've been living in Lake County myself since 2005, peacefully enjoying life amidst our beautiful surroundings, never once even attended a Board of Supervisors meeting. The board's COVID mandates are not like any other business because they are not authorized by statute. They are extra-legal, authorized solely by the state of emergency declared by Gavin Newsom, citation of which is included in the first paragraph of all the board's COVID resolutions. Therefore, it is entirely reasonable, nearly 2 years later, to question the cause for this emergency here in our county, a cause for which the board has assumed extraordinary, unprecedented, and extra-legal powers. The continuation of emergency authorized mandates without due question of the reality of the claimed emergency indicates a dangerous precedent, a disturbing potential for a slide into authoritarian rule by decree. And when questioned regarding the cause for the emergency, if it cannot be properly justified or even articulated, this is indeed alarming. The board cannot abdicate its responsibilities to the people of this county and cannot ignore their oaths of office. It is incumbent upon them to independently evaluate the basis for a medical emergency in this county, a condition that must rise to a sufficient level of threat as to justify A, ongoing departure from the domain of statutory business, and B, massive intrusions into the constitutional rights and natural freedom of county residents. Based on that, it is clear that the board should immediately roll back all COVID measures, free the people of Lake County from medical tyranny, and confine itself entirely to the traditional domain of statute-authorized business. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are you finished?
I have finished. Thank you very much.
I'd also like to direct you to item 7.2, which is later on the, we're not sure exactly when that will be. However, when it does, it sounds like a lot of what you had discussed in public input could have been put there. So just giving you that insight. Okay, thank you for your comments. Next, I think this person already spoke, but I'll check. Phone 1113?
No.
Oh, okay. Phone 1113, you have 3 minutes.
Yes, hi. This is Dr. Will Tuttle, and I'd like to address the COVID situation in Lake County regarding actually what
Just real
gentleman
quick, if we
said
could pause the
before
3
me.
minutes so I can just, I'd just like to ask again, because I don't remember knowing, understanding what your doctorate is in.
Yeah, I have a PhD from Berkeley in education.
Okay, thank you.
And that's actually given me, I'll just say, a lot of insight into the corruption of science, because I took courses in quantitative and qualitative methods of research, which doctors never do, actually. They just learn how to, but this will be part of my team, that's all. I won't. And I just want to say that's one of the main points I want to make, is that doctors are not scientists. Doctors don't learn how to do science, obviously. And they learn protocols, and they learn how to treat illnesses and so forth, but they have to stay within parameters that are laid down by the AMA. And so what the gentleman before me he mentioned medical tyranny. I think that's what you as supervisors are really required to do, is to protect the people of Lake County from the corruption of the medical system, where science is being, I'm sorry?
Sorry, we didn't unpause your time, but keep going. Yes, please.
Okay. So that there's this so-called science has become a death cult, really. It's very dangerous, and the whole world is supposed to pretend that COVID vaccines are halting infections and transmission and hospitalizations, all the while looking the other way when so many vaccinated people die prematurely. Israel, for example, is 96.2% vaccination rate across the population, now leads the world in COVID cases per capita. This proves the vaccine has the opposite effect of what we were promised in the name of, quote, science. In fact, the more a country vaccinates its people, the higher the COVID cases rise. That's because, of course, the vaccine actually is the pandemic. COVID would be over by now if not for the vaccine continuing to inject people with spike protein bioweapons that cause organ failure, micro blood clots, and death. No coincidence that vaccine injury symptoms are then categorized as COVID by the corrupt and murderous medical establishment that receives financial kickbacks from the government for killing people with ventilators and remdesivir. This is what's happening. And we have to understand that the people who are serving as the county health directors, they cannot question it, or they will instantly lose their job. So you are the only ones, hopefully, that can actually question this narrative and protect the people from this happening. This has been growing for decades, and now it's gotten to the point where the corruption is so powerful, and Big Pharma owns the media and most of the governmental agencies, and now people are being really harmed by this. So I just want to emphasize that point. Please exercise courage and ethical behavior so that this does not continue, and don't continue to go along with the devastating impact that the so-called medical devices have. That's my comment. Thank you very much.
Finished? Okay. I didn't hear his last statement, but okay. Thank you for that, and it looks like we don't have any other hands up.
I do. Yeah, I was just asked to speak public input, requesting the Middletown Unified School District Board meetings be transitioned to Zoom participation for people that don't feel comfortable going to the board meetings in person. I know the board is considering that request, and we'll have a special board meeting tonight, so I'm just officially making that request to that board for the safety for all to participate.
Thank you. Okay. All right. I think that will conclude with public input. I'm not seeing any other hands, so we'll move on to item 6.2, presentation of proclamation designating the month of February 2022 as Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month in Lake County. And we will have Vice Chair Scott will read this proclamation. And if there's anybody in the chambers that would like to come up and be a part of it as well.
I believe we have quite a bit of community support from the Lake Family Resource Center. If you want to come up and join me as I read this. Board of Supervisors, County of Lake, State of California proclamation designating the month of February 2022 as Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month in Lake County. Whereas Teen Dating Awareness and Prevention Month reflects our community's growing understanding of violence within relationships often begin during adolescence, and about 1 in 3 teens report being the victim of verbal, physical, emotional, or sexual violence. And whereas the modern efforts to address teen dating violence must include the realities of today's youth, digital tools such as cell phones, social network sites, and access to online gaming or entertainment plays major roles in teens' life. But they also allow predators to access our teens, and often it's under the radar of caregivers and safe adults. And whereas prevention of teen dating violence includes reducing the stigma and silence around the issues and provides safe space for discussion and education around healthy relationships and communication life skills. And whereas teen dating violence is a community problem, prevention includes support from the entire community. Increasing awareness provides opportunities for more community members to come together and to discuss teen dating violence in our community and work towards a solution. Now, therefore, it be proclaimed that this month of February 2022 is designated as Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month in Lake County, and our community is urged to support the efforts of the agency assisting victims of teen dating violence and to increase our involvement in efforts to prevent teen dating violence, thereby strengthening our community and creating an environment which honors, nurtures, and protects all members of every family. Passed and adopted this 15th day of February 2022 and signed by our chair, Crandall. We have, okay. Somebody wants to take that? And I would have to think with COVID, it's really probably put a lot of pressure on our teens and just bringing awareness. I know for myself as a parent with 5 teens, it's hard to keep track of what your teens are doing when they have their phones. So just being diligent, turn that Wi-Fi off at night. That's what I do, so they don't have access to it. I mean, we have the capabilities of doing that. It's very simple now. So we just have to be aware, talk to our teens, have that open communication, and I just want to thank you for all your work that you do.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm Sharon Marr, Communications Coordinator for Lake Family Resource Center. This back here, Lake Family Resource Center staff. And yeah, this is a very important issue to us for a lot of what you said, particularly in today's world where we have such access to digital tools and our youth has that same access. And so really about this month is talking about it and talking to each other about it, talking to our kids about it, having youth talk to each other about it, and coming up with tools and resources and solutions in order to keep them safe and protected. So we appreciate that you took the time to put a voice to this. We do this awareness every February, and so we're glad that we were able to come to the county level this time, and we got everybody on board, and we're feeling good about the communication that's happening in the county, and particularly wanting to talk about digital tools and start looking at that for prevention. So, thank you.
I'm sure Sam wants to get a photo. So.
Okay, terrific. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for all your work.
Are there any comments
that
from the board? And I'm not seeing anything on public. I'll open it up for public input, and I'm not seeing anything there. So we'll bring the next item, 6.3, presentation of proclamation designating the month of February 2022 Black History Month and celebrating Martin Luther King's birthday. And Supervisor Sabatier will read the proclamation.
Thank you very much, Chair Crandall, for the honor of reading this. What I love about Black History Month to me is it's the American history of the struggle to make the words, all men are created equal, reality. And so thank you for being with me here, Rick Mayo, who is the president of the NAACP chapter here in Lake County. Proclamation designating the month of February 2022 Black History Month and celebrating Martin Luther King's birthday. Whereas the Lake County branch of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, NAACP, will celebrate a combination of Black History Month and Martin Luther King's birthday as we reflect on the proud legacy and courage and dedication from visionary leaders like Martin Luther King Jr., Elijah Cummings, African-American military veterans, and the NAACP has been at the forefront of protecting voting rights of people of color in this county and continue addressing voter suppression, gerrymandering, and urging the passing of the John Lewis Voters' Right Advancement Act and the Freedom to Vote Act, which includes the restoration of the 1965 Voting Rights Act that will ensure all citizens' voting rights are protected under the United States Constitution. And whereas the NAACP history is one of dedication and struggle to maintain equality and justice for all citizens of the United States. And whereas the local branch, like other NAACP branches throughout the state and country, diligently works on social programs aimed towards the elimination of racial hatred, bigotry, and poverty. And whereas the Lake County branch of the NAACP is led by Rick Mayo, president and 1982 founder of the Lake County branch. Now therefore be it proclaimed that February 2022 is designated Black History Month, and the Lake County branch of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People is commended on the vital role it has played in improving the quality of life in our local community, and that the branch be extended best wishes and continued success. Passed and adopted this 15th day of February 2022 and signed by our chair.
Thank you, members of the Board of Supervisors. Each year that you present this proclamation to us makes us realize how far we really have come. And we've been doing this close to 25 years here in Lake County now. And that's a long time to still be trying to find the common ground that we need in order for all of us to coexist in this society. One of the things that I would like to speak on just briefly is that our nation is at a crossroads. Well, are we going to continue with our democracy? Are we going to fall into some type of autocracy? Thank you. Autocracy. And it's up to us to maintain this democracy that we have. This is the best thing that we have going on, and we need to continue to protect the voting rights and other rights of the citizens of this country. And I appreciate this Board of Supervisors, you understand, for presenting us this proclamation. And the Lake County government reflects the diversity of this community. Thank you so much. I want to turn it over to my cousin.
Oh.
Elmo Mosby.
My name is St. Elmo Mosby. Rick Mayo is my first cousin. And I have been active with the NAACP since I was a teenager, because we both grew up in the South. And we did not have the things available to us that we have today as far as voting rights and a lot of other things that we were mistreated during that time. I have served 24 years in the Navy. I can recall when we were not accepted as well in the Navy. I'm now 80 years old, so I can remember a lot of these things. But I really appreciate the things that you have done here in Lake County. I've been a resident since 2004. And I look forward to these proclamations each year. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Oh.
No, and yeah, thank you. Trying to get everybody. Okay, great, thank you.
And I see that our sheriff is here, wondering if he has any words.
Just here, offer.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Is there anyone that would like to, has anything they would like to say, or is there anyone on, in the chambers? No, not saying on public input or on, online, so we will bring it to the next agenda item, which is our 9:30. 6.4, consideration of update on urgency ordinance number 3107 enacted on 7/27/21, imposing a temporary prohibition moratorium on the issuance of early activation permits for land use projects within the unincorporated area of the County of Lake, and update on the Community Development Department operations. And let's see. Oh, actually, this is, I'll let you go ahead and go, Jessica, Supervisor Pysko or Supervisor Simon, because I think this has
Sure. Yeah, Supervisor Simon and I were tasked late last spring with supporting the community development with a committee, and through the time when we did not have a director, and kind of assisting when we have a new director, and also tasked with streamlining the cannabis application process. So we've been working very closely with Director Darby and our CAO Hutchinson, and so we've been looking forward to today's report.
All right.
Yeah, you know, I know that the board had asked for an update, and so obviously we've been doing our work with our committee meetings as we move forward, and today is just an update, just to talk about where we're going. As you know, when we passed the moratorium, there was a time frame that we had to work on it, and you know, so today hopefully we'll have some good information that's provided, kind of lay out a timeline. That's what we're kind of looking to do. And so excited to have that conversation today as we move forward with this update. And like I said, it was requested of the board to come back and have an update, so we're making sure we take care of that.
I don't see Director Darby online.
I don't see Director Darby either.
Yeah, I've sent a couple reminders to her, and not hearing from her.
Oh,
Here she comes.
There she is. Hello. Just started the agenda item. So where should she probably, maybe right? Is there a microphone there for her?
No.
Oh.
Should we just have her come up
Yeah.
here?
Yeah, I think that would probably be. Yeah.
I don't have a computer anymore.
I'm glad you're on that side.
If she wants to be seated, we could move that little table up and give her the hand mic right there.
Yeah, no worries.
Control of your PowerPoint, you can sit right here, I'll move right there.
I think that Miles may operate from here. I think so. Oh, I think it says revised. Oops.
First one.
Revised.
First one on top.
That's it.
It might be easier, Bruno, if you just consider.
Session item 8.3.
Yep, popped up. Hold on, I'm going to do one more thing for you before you let go. Do it.
Thank you, sir. Aim it that way. Okay, cool.
Perfect.
Perfect. Give me 1 second just to get organized here, please. I would like to start off by saying good morning to everyone.
Good morning.
Sir Chair, Board of Supervisors, Legal Counsel, and Administration. My name is Mary Darby, and I am the Community Development Director here for Lake County. And the purpose of my presentation here today is to provide an update to the urgency ordinance imposing prohibition to the moratorium on the issuance of early activation permits for land use projects, and to also provide an update on the reorganization of the Community Development Department. So kind of bear with me as I go through this, because I do have a lot of ordinances to review. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you
Awesome.
just fine, thank you.
And happy belated Valentine's Day to everyone. Here we go. So today what I'm going to do is the agenda is going to look like this. We're going to do a little bit of a background. We're going to look at the purpose of adding the new ordinance. We're going to look at the revised ordinance, where we are, where we're going, how are we going to get there, and what our next steps are to have a successful revised ordinance. I've added some data and other slides into this presentation for background purposes. So for background information, oops, a daisy, I have to sit here and, there we go. So in July 27, 2021, as you know, the board approved the Ordinance 3106, which is an urgency ordinance requiring a hydrology report and drought management plan to provide enhanced water analysis for our cannabis projects. In addition, on July 27, 2021, Ordinance number 3107 was approved by the board for a 45-day interim ordinance, emergency ordinance, temporarily prohibiting the issuance of early activation permits for land use projects. In August of 2031, the board came back with ordinance number 3111, and the purpose of that ordinance was to extend the urgency ordinance number 3107 to establish a moratorium on the issuance of early activation permits for land use projects and to provide additional time to prepare studies and reports as it relates to the ordinance. On August 24th, 2021, I apologize, I should have come before August 31st, the board approved ordinance number 3110, ordinance to prohibit water hauling to unpermitted cannabis cultivation sites. So let's talk a little bit about what ordinance, the urgency ordinance 3111 did. So for findings and declarations, so the purpose of the ordinance was to demonstrate that a current and immediate threat to the public health, safety, and welfare of our communities continues to exist, which required the extension of the ordinance until July 24th, 2022. The purpose of the ordinance was to allow staff time to address problems related to the issuance of early activation permits, address the backlog of early activation applications, complete the necessary studies and reports to fully evaluate the projects, cannabis projects, and to support the contemplated zoning ordinance proposed amendments, in which staff will be making soon. Let's see it like that. So how are early activation permits defined? And you all may all know this, but me only being here for a little longer than 4 months, it was very important that I actually went back and studied what early activations, what the ordinance says, what the purpose was, so I could properly analyze what we're doing and where we're trying to go with early activation permits. So according to section 27.4 for early activation of use, it states that notwithstanding the provisions of section 2127.10 pertaining to uses generally permitted with a use permit, and those uses listed as permitted subject to first obtaining either a minor use permit in each zoning district, minor or major use permit in each zoning district. I know that's a mouthful, but the part that really kind of grabbed me was, it stated also in this section 27.4 that the planning division may issue an early activation permit allowing for the immediate activation of any use requiring a minor use permit or a major use permit subject to conditions. And with these early activation permits, the early activation permits, from what I could tell so far, were actually treated like use permits, and they required all the analysis pretty much. Staff was analyzing the early activation permits as if they were use permits, but there were actually two separate criteria in which these use permits and the early activation permits should have followed. So I'm going to go through what the requirements are, or the criteria for early activation permits. And I'm sorry, I sound like I'm out of breath because I ran downstairs. Okay. Okay, so in order to determine or to deem an early activation permit complete, early activation permits shall not allow any construction, grading, removal of mature trees on the property. From my experience with dealing with the early activation permits, a lot of them have been doing that. So an early activation permit should not have been accepted based on that criteria alone. Second, early activations, in order to deem it complete, adequate measures shall be included in the early activation permit application and implemented upon commencement of the use for dust control, parking, traffic safety, drainage, erosion control, waste disposal, and the health department requirements. Again, I will say that some of the early activation permits that we received should not have been received because we do have a lot of issues with our current applications, even when we talk about traffic, parking, or dust control. The third criteria was that, or is, that the early activation permit must be accompanied by an application for the applicable minor or major use permit. So when I first got here, I got a little confused because I didn't read this section. So I was advised that early activation permits should not have been accepted along with a minor or major use permit. And I took that information and I ran with it. But then later I learned, working with legal, Nicole Johnson, which is great, I learned that the early activation permit process and the use permit process are actually two separate processes. And we should not, in our department, we should not have accepted those together because they actually have two defined criteria in which they should operate. And if we would have done that, then we would have learned and discovered that the early activation permit, a lot of the ones in which we accepted, should have never been accepted as a project in our department. The other criteria in terms of deeming a project complete under early activation was that the early activation permit shall expire 6 months from the date of the issuance or upon issuance or denial of the required minor or major use permit or resolution of any appeal thereof. The early activation permits in the 6 months process in terms of termination, a lot of the projects, and I'll review this as we go along, are actually still in queue. And because they are in queue, they have not been approved, therefore their early activation permit date has not expired. So they are all still pending. And as I go along, I will actually share with you which projects in terms of early activation have been approved and which ones are pending. Further criteria for the early activation permits. The Planning Division may deny an application for an early activation permit for early activation of use if the use may result in adverse environmental impacts, or if the use is currently being operated in violation of this chapter. So I look at this and I read it, and it states that if the use may result in adverse environmental impacts. Well, from the time I've been here, I've noticed that there have been a lot of environmental adverse impacts with some of the projects that we've been looking at, whether or not it relates to odor, noise, traffic, and other issues that are deemed in the use permit or the early activation permits in terms of adverse impacts. So a lot of the projects, again, should not have been accepted. Early activation is not permitted for uses listed in section 22.6 of this chapter, and that's pretty much deals with use permits. And the application for an early activation permit shall be accompanied with a fee equivalent to that established by the board. That fee is very minimal. It's like $200 or something like that. I don't know the exact number off the top of my head. But the staff review time of an early activation permit is basically the same amount of time that it would take for staff to review a use permit. So that became an issue as well. The reason why I put the environmental review section here on the slide, it talks about in section 4 of Ordinance 3111, it states that the environmental review process is exempt for early activation. That seemed to be a little conflicting with what our requirements are and how we're actually going to protect the public safety and welfare of our communities. Now, here comes the fun part. Oops, sorry, that was my fault. There we go. The current status of early activation permits. So after the approved early activations after July 27, 2021, based on our adopted ordinance number 3111, has only been 2. Early activations pending received in 2021 is currently 33. You're going to see these numbers again, but I'm going to run them by you because I want them to kind of be fresh in your head. Totally, currently we have a total of 243 cannabis cultivation applications. The cultivation projects itself is 239. The other remainders of those are broken down into manufacturing projects, which are 2, processing plants, which is 3, and micro business project, which is 1. We have 2 retail sales projects requiring a use permit. In terms of the number of projects that have either been withdrawn, appealed, or denied, we have 4 withdrawn, 5 denied, and 7 appeals. So that brings us to where are we now? So we kind of have a background of where we came from. Now let's talk about where we are now. So there are currently 100 approved cannabis cultivation permits out of the 243. Let me know if I'm kind of going out because I'm turning to the side to make sure you can hear me. So there are a total of 100 approved permit applications for cannabis cultivations, again, out of the total 243 that we have received in our department. Out of the 243 approved, are pending, you can actually see on this map, which depicts the number of cannabis locations, and this is based on acreage. So the diagram actually shows whether or not it's under an acre or over 100 acres. And these are where the cannabis cultivation sites are currently located, are being proposed. There you go. So here further we break it down a little more, which it makes it a little bit easier on the eye. So you can actually see the 100 approved projects are in green. You can see the 134 pending projects are in yellow, and the denied or withdrawn projects of 9 are in red. And I'll just let you look at that for just a second. Okay, thank you. Here, this map depicts where these proposed or pending projects are located based on district. District 1, there are approximately 27 projects which have been approved, and there are 44 projects which are pending. I would like to note that this slide or this map was actually devised in December of 2021, so some of the numbers have changed a little. In District 2, there are 3 projects that have been approved, and there are 5 projects that are pending. District 3, there are 18 projects that were approved, and there are 33 projects that are pending. District 4, there are 18 projects that are approved, and 27 projects which are pending. And District 5, there are 17 projects approved and 31 projects pending. We also illustrate the acreage for each project, whether or not it was approved or pending, for your information. Okay.
You mind if I ask a quick question to clarify?
Yes.
This is the cultivation area or the total, it's just the cultivation area, not the canopy area, correct?
Well, here, before we were able to break up our cultivation area from our canopy area, so this is total. This is cultivation and canopy. However, I do have data that I can provide later, which breaks up the cultivation area from the canopy area.
Thank you.
Okay. Oops, I think I'm going the wrong way. This is just a, as of February the 15th, our numbers again. So again, you have total projects of 243. The 100 projects have been approved. 135 are pending. 9 are denied or withdrawn. And for further information, 1 project is being prepared for an appeal. 15 projects are being prepared for staff reports for our Planning Commission hearing coming soon. 53 projects are in our initial study and CEQA review phase. 39 projects are under agency or tribal review. 39 projects are under completeness review and awaiting further documentations. And 40 projects have been transferred over to our consultants, which is LACO. And I have data that I can provide later for you if you would like to know the status of where LACO, where they are in their process. So, after going through the background and giving you a kind of status of where we are, let's talk about where we're going. So it's very important because water, of course, is a big issue here. So our GIS person name is Andrew Amalong. He is also our cannabis program manager. He has been doing a phenomenal job. He has actually provided and created these maps for us, along with Mary Claiborne, who has provided the data and updated of where we are. So they have been working very hard to make sure that we stay on top of this project and to identify where these projects are going. So in terms of where we're going, we're starting to look at the watersheds in the county, all the watersheds. And so we're mapping out where our existing, our pending projects are along the watersheds. So this information will be actually fleshed out a little bit more when I give my next presentation about where we are with water. But I wanted to provide you an illustration of where we are with the watersheds. So this is Big Valley Watershed, Shoreline Watershed. Sorry. Come on. Thurston Lake and Lower Lake watersheds. Upper Putah and Middle Putah watersheds. Cache Creek watershed. Elk River watershed. Middle Creek and Scotts Creek watersheds. And those are the watersheds. And those will be we're working on those currently to flesh out the information a little better. Okay? So how do we get to where we're trying to go, and what's our end result? What are we trying to achieve, and where are we trying to say we are successful with this project in the 243 projects in which we have either pending or approved? So I'm going to stop here for just a second and just talk before I move on to the next subject. So with the projects that we have in queue, we are working with the consultants to make sure that we are expeditiously pushing these projects forward. A lot of the projects require initial studies, so we do have to determine the environmental review of these projects in terms of CEQA. I have found that in dealing with a lot of these projects, they do require environmental impact reports, or they do require some type of negative mitigated declaration. So 33 of the projects they still need initial studies. And so that is kind of like where we are now. Staff is actually working on initial studies. We did not transfer the initial studies purview over to our consultants. So staff is diligently working to conduct those studies for the initial studies. That's where we are with those projects. We are looking at other consultants to see if we can find other help to move projects forward. It's just an idea that we're looking at to see if we can move the projects forward a little more expeditiously. But in the meantime, we have designed a process with LACO for internal review as well as external review to move these projects forward. And the process with the LACO and our cannabis planning team is coming along quite well. In terms of, so we're going to switch gears, and before I do that, do you have any questions regarding cannabis cultivation and the 243 projects? Everyone except,
I have I have a quick question for you. I know that in our ordinance, it requires that applicants submit annual water reports or water use reports. Is that being reviewed when looking at the water maps to make sure that it's not just the estimated amount that they say that they're using, but what their wells actually have metered? Because I'm always kind of curious how close is their actual water use versus what their estimates are, because that's all they are estimates when we go through the initial study and the process through the Planning Commission.
So actually, that's a good question. And the answer to your question is we are working on it. So when we actually get the reports, staff at this time has not been trained to really look at and analyze hydrology reports, drought management plans, and to actually look at what the requirements are for water sites and how much water usage is required. However, we have hired an excellent person. His name is Michael McGinnis. He is our new principal planner who has excellent skills in CEQA review. And he's doing a phenomenal job in terms of looking at those reports and making sure that that water, adequate water, is provided before we move the projects forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. The watersheds will become a part of the review as he continues. He's been here now for 2 weeks. Okay, so let's talk about the Community Development Department and the reorganization of the Community Development Department. So from what I understand from history, that the department with the cannabis project, all the planners were pretty much kind of geared towards working on cannabis projects. So therefore, a lot of the other projects that we look at, whether or not they were long-range or short-range projects or lot line adjustments, mergers, or any other type of land use project that wasn't dealing with cannabis was kind of put on the back burner. That caused a big problem in our department, and I'm sure that a lot of people are probably upset, but we are moving those projects forward as diligently as we possibly can. In order to ensure that we're not just having the entire planning team working on cannabis projects, we are redesigning the department so that we have a cannabis planning team, and then we have another team which is divided up into short-range planners and long-range planners. And so if you look at this chart here, you'll see that I'm at the top of the chart, and then we have a vacant deputy director position. We just hired a staff service analyst. Her name is Sarah Whitman. She started yesterday. Very energetic. We also have hired a business software analyst. And this position is very important because the business software analyst is the person who's going to ensure that our projects get into a SELA. Not only is he going to ensure that our projects get into a SELA, he's going to train the staff on actually how to use a SELA. And most importantly, he's going to help us create those invoices that we need so the planning department can actually obtain some money for a budget. So he has a very important position. You have a question?
No, I'm just listening. Sorry.
Okay, that's no problem.
And very happy to hear about that update, because I know that that's been a very deep hole that we've been putting CDD into by not having that capability to bill for all the hours above and beyond what the initial fees are. So very thankful for that.
Yes, sir. And my only caution is that CDD, we are dynamite. We are dynamic, and we're innovative, and I think that sometimes our staff is not actually receive the accolades that they probably should receive. They work very hard, and although they may not have the skill set that we need at this time to move projects forward, they have the heart. And sometimes having the heart is even more important than having the skill set. And I think that they're overlooked a lot. I think that they should receive more praise, and I think they should receive more thank yous. Thank you. Just wanted to put that little plug in there. So then we have our principal planner, Michael McGinnis. Again, like I said, he's only been here a couple of weeks. No, 2 months. He's been here 2 months. And we've broken this section off. So we have our cannabis planning team and our cannabis planning manager, Andrew Amalong. And with Andrew, he's working with Eric Porter, which is our associate planner. He's working with Mary Claybon, who we just promoted up to assistant planner. She was our CDC cannabis intake person. She's a star. You want to hold on to her? And then we have Jamie Henry, which we just hired as the CDD technician who replaced Mary Claiborne's position, and Mary is directly training Jamie, so that's working out perfectly. This is the team that works with LACO. This is the team that's dividing the process. This is the team that's making the projects move. Very important team. Other projects that the Cannabis Project team is working on are pre-application meetings, use permits, the minor use permits, zoning clearances, zoning permits. They should not be working on the zoning ordinance, except for the text amendment to the revised cannabis ordinance, and then, of course, the GIS. And then for the long-range planning team, we've divided that team up into two areas. So we have long-range projects, short-range projects. This team comprised of Eric, we are really stretching him thin, Eric Porter, Victor Fernandez, which is our associate planner, Satir Ham, our assistant planner. However, Satir has resigned, and her last day is February the 25th. We have Catherine Schaefer. She is out on family medical leave. Trish Turner, who is also a Dynamite CDD technician in land use. We have Peggy Barthel. She's our extra help in our research planner position. We are actually advertising and getting ready to interview. The type of projects this team actually look at or work on for long range is the general plan update, the community retrofit program, the drought management plan. Short-range projects, mergers, lot line adjustments, parcels, subdivisions, variances, zoning clearances, zoning permits, and the update of the zoning ordinance. Yeah, that's it. And I only originally added planning. So although CDD has 3 separate distinct divisions, as you know, so we have building and safety, we have code enforcement, and we have planning. So when I first got here, I thought that my strategy would be to take the department or the division that needed the most help and jump in there and help that division. So building and safety was kind of cruising on its own, so I kind of left them alone, although there are some things I recommend that can be done with building and safety. And then code enforcement was another area in which I believe that we needed to strengthen. And so by doing that, I actually promoted Marcus Beltramo. He is a star. He is really making that team work. We have hired 2 additional code enforcement officers. We have 1 code enforcement officer position that's vacant right now. However, it's being advertised. That will be the position for the cannabis officer. He is training everyone. And he has also broken down the job duties and requirements of all the code enforcement officers and the sections of the county in which they would work. So I'll let you look at that for a second.
Quick
Yes,
question. I know with the roadmap task force that there was the looking at getting the dedicated. Are Linda Rosas Bill and Antonio Chavez those that are assigned to the roadmap task force, or is it kind of a different coordination for that?
At this time, after having my meeting with Mr. Beltramo, I think that he is going to identify who's going to be assigned to the roadmap task force and who's actually going to be assigned as the cannabis officer. So that's pending, but we do have the officers to move forward.
Awesome.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Next steps. So our next steps are, we're looking at the fees and fines. We're looking at our cannabis checklist. We're also looking at our strategies on cannabis cultivation projects from a small scale and a large scale, because there are different processes in which we have to operate or move those along. So for our small scale cannabis project, in terms of enforcement, we're looking at identifying the non-permitted cultivation sites which are in violation. We're looking at contacting the owner for consent to conduct inspections to verify plant count. And we're also looking at remedies to initiate for zoning clearances. For those are for small scale. In terms of large scale, it's a little bit more involved. So we're looking at our illegal groves of property owners on site and off site. We're looking at illegal groves on properties where property owners are unaware. And we're looking for property owners that do not live in the area where cultivation sites are illegal. And we're also looking at property owner when the property owner discover that they have an illegal grow on their site. So the process is just a little different. We identify the non-permitted violation sites. We contact the owner for consent to conduct an inspection, to verify plant count on our search warrant. We partner with the sheriff department to determine chip plants on site and haul to dump. So Marcus have been working or meeting with the planning or the sheriffs to work that out, and we do have another meeting to kind of funnel all this through. And that's where we are in that particular regards. Also, I would just like to add that we are looking at new uniforms for our code enforcement officers. They are beautiful. So we're looking at a tactical green with beige pants that they can use. We're also looking at identifying the new vehicle that we have to be wrapped to let everyone know that this is code enforcement. So that will be our first prototype with our vehicle. So they would have big bold letters that says code enforcement on it, and the new uniforms will be coming. And we also have badges now for our new code enforcement officers because they've been harassed in the community.
I have a question on this information here. Between the identify the non-permitted cultivation site is in violation, I would suspect that the contact with the owner is if there's proof of the violation. At what point, because we've been talking about administrative fines and we just finalized them not too long ago, is that between 1 and 2 that the fines start if it passes, I think we said 5 to 10 days or something like that? Would it be at that point that the fines start?
That is correct.
Okay. Thank you. And I'm sorry, if you go back one, it talks about satellite imagery on there. How will you be using satellite imagery? Is that as a follow-up to a complaint? Is that as a way to identify what is happening? What is your strategy in continuing to use the satellite imagery?
So I have been advised by my code enforcement manager that the way the satellite imagery would be used is that each officer has their own assigned district, and they would periodically do a sweep of their area to identify if there's anything unusual in their area, just as a kind of a daily use. However, if there are sites that have been identified as being in violation, they would use that as well.
Thank you.
Would they, would they employ the administrative fines at that time, or would they go through a process to notify them and then come?
Unfortunately, there's a process, and so they would have to go through that process. So they have so many days to notify them, so many days for the property owner to clear up the violation, and then even way before they even get to like an abatement or anything like that. So there's a process.
And just one more question. Are they using the satellite images for anything else besides grows? Like, for example, like code violations when it comes to like people squatting and multiple people living in properties, if that makes sense?
Yes, it does. And currently, I cannot say that we've been using it for that reason, but that's an excellent idea, actually. So thank you. I'll make sure that's incorporated.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, here come a fun topic. Let's talk about scenic combining districts, okay? So I think I've been working with legal, and I think we kind of ironed this one out for right now, but I do understand that in the future that an ordinance will be forthcoming from legal to kind of tie all this together. But what we did is, Nicole Johnson what we did is kind of looked at what's existing in our code ordinance currently that could be legally defensible to identify where the scenic combining districts are, how we measure them in terms of whether they're inside the district or outside the district, and I'll just sum it up really quickly. So we're using our sectional district maps as well as our parcel maps to see where the scenic combining district is. So there was I think the confusion was that in the ordinance, it stated in Article 3, I believe, it talked about the district boundaries. So in the district boundaries for scenic combining, the interpretation was that if the scenic combining district touched the parcel, then the entire parcel was considered in the scenic combining district. But since then, we have identified in our assessor parcel maps that there are actually boundaries in the maps with the square footage. So we can actually clearly depict where that district is and then define where that boundary is, which actually takes care of that Article 3 with the determination of the boundaries. Okay. So you can have a greenhouse outside of a scenic combining district along a county or a state route, but you have specific criteria that goes with that. And so at first we were saying and interpreting that you could not. It was just prohibited because if the scenic combining district touched the lot, then the entire parcel was in the lot, and we were saying that the greenhouse was prohibited. However, that is no longer the case. The case now is if you're along a county road or a state highway, then there are criteria that we look at to determine whether or not the greenhouse could be 5,000 square feet or 10,000 square feet. So you can have a greenhouse outside of the scenic combining district, but you have criteria that must be followed and met. And there are no variances for scenic combining districts yet. I'll say that. I'm saying that just in case one of you say, hey, I want a variance. But there are no variances for scenic combining districts, okay?
I appreciate you bringing that to us. I know that we've had a couple of people, I believe, speaking right here in public comment about the issue. I know it's been brought up multiple times throughout the latest planning commissions, and I've received some emails about it. So thank you very much for coming to a resolution for this and reading it over. It seems to be acceptable. If I understand correctly, the scenic combining district is kind of like the exclusion zone. It's kind of a nebulous cloud. It doesn't necessarily form shape to the properties themselves, which is where you can have portions of the properties that are good to go, where other portions are not because of the cloud that covers only portions of it. Am I correct on that?
That is correct, and I will interpret your cloud to complement the area plans of the communities of the county. So the scenic combining districts were actually driven, or they were actually drawn to complement each area plan, and so they changed. So when we go in, we look at each, we meaning staff of CDD, we look at each project independently, individually, to see whether or not what the impacts are for the scenic combining district. We look at the general plan requirements, we look at the area plan requirements, and then we look at the zoning ordinance requirements based on whether or not it's adjacent to a county road or a state highway.
And I know in the, if you go to the Cannabis GIS map, there's all kinds of different layers that you can look at and not look at. There's water districts, there's the farmland protection zone, there's the exclusion zone, like there's all kinds of different layers. Will that become one of the layers to be able to identify from a public perspective when looking at, should I comment on this or should I submit an application on this? Will that be available for the public to be able to see?
I think that it should be available. I can't right now tell you where in the area of priorities that would be, but right now that would be something eventually that we could have as a GIS layer.
Okay. And if I understood correctly, this interpretation is the way it's going to be interpreted as of now, and then the ordinance will come to us just to finalize that?
That is correct.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You have a question?
Yes,
Sarah?
I just had a comment because I think also in hearing this, there was a meeting between myself and Victor Fernandez and Mike Herman out of Clear Lake Oaks, who had identified some GIS issues when it comes to this, a lot of what we're talking about, and it sounds like some of that might be cleared up through what you're working on, so I appreciate that as well.
I hope so. And I just, the last thing that I said in terms of, as we review these projects, of course, they will also be reviewed against CEQA. Everything's reviewed against CEQA. Okay. So just in the future, as we move forward with the ordinance, revised ordinance, we'll be looking at the fees and fines, noise, odor, security, and illegal growth, just to let you know where we're going in the future with CDD looking at this ordinance. Some of the other things that we didn't address in our ordinance that I think that we should address would be the new thing in town with cannabis, and that's the layering of the cannabis sites, which is the auto flower. I'm learning a lot here. And the tiering of cannabis. So this is just a diagram to show you how we created our internal workflow with LACO. I can share that with anyone later on. And here, we actually took the current cannabis ordinance and the revised cannabis ordinance, and we put them side by side, and we said what has changed. So as we move forward in our next meeting, we're going to explain to you what actually has changed between the current ordinance and the proposed ordinance. And by the time you get this next time, there will be another chart over here, and it will actually state what the state requirements are for the ordinance. So you'll have a comprehensive overview of where we are, where we're going, and where we're trying to get to. Okay, let's talk about a proposed schedule. I think I'm getting towards the end. So we are proposing that the March, we would like to work further to try to complete the revised ordinance. In April, we would like to hold workshops with all stakeholders to introduce them to what we're proposing to do and where we're going. A lot of this is my draft information. And then we would like to present before the board on May 24th and June 7th if needed. And we may, depending on where we are, will request a 2-month extension, but right now we're not 100% sure until we finish our review in March. And that concludes my presentation.
I appreciate all the work. I think there's so many things happening in CDD. As you said, there's building, there's code enforcement, there's planning. And I feel like my statement will swipe the rug from underneath you, and I apologize for that. But in the state that we're in with our drought, I was just speaking with Supervisor Scott about it. We are currently at approximately 0.5 feet Rumsey. Last year we were at 1 foot Rumsey, so we're half a foot behind. Granted, we don't know, and there's no crystal ball that's going to tell us how much rain we're supposed to get in March or April or May, but sitting down in state conversations, they do not expect much rain at all in Central and Southern California until next winter or next fall. And so as we progress and we find a way to make this work, that still stresses our water resource capabilities here. As we keep going on this unfortunate drought, we all hope that it would end and that was the bottom, but we keep finding new ways to reach bottom. And in a way, we're tracking something, but yet not really tracking other things. And I get it, there's the right to farm, but at the same time, commercial agriculture needs to also ensure that residents and other surrounding properties, no matter what their used activity has been permitted, need to all collaborate together for the scant resources that a drought leaves behind. And I know there's been a lot of work that's been done from the committee to your department in reviewing and looking at this, but in my opinion, we either need one or two things or both. We need an agricultural ordinance that states what processes everything needs to go through to ensure continued access to water for things that are already here. And number two, maybe we need to have a limit on how much cannabis right now we allow, because the more we allow, the more the market continues to crash. Granted, every other county is doing its own thing to help with that crash. And I think the applications that are in, they're in, but maybe we just need to say right now, no more applications, period, at this moment in time. We are now talking about last year it was exceptional drought, now it's a 1,200-year drought. So I'm concerned of all the time that's been spent on something where the industry has crashed, water is becoming continuously scarce, and yet all this work put into that. So again, don't mean to pull the rug from under your feet with all the work that's been done, but I'm very concerned about continuing at this moment in time, other than the applications that are in, because that would be very unfair to those that have already made an effort to start. So just putting it out there, just because I think it should be a part of this discussion today. And then you said you had numbers for LACO, wondering if you might have those available.
I do not have them with me. I can send them to you individually.
Okay.
Can I jump in for a second here?
Yeah, no,
I'm glad you brought that up. All of the things. You and I are on a different committee, kind of committed to the long-term drought management part of it, which also Mary is part of. So that conversation definitely needs to continue. We had a lot of conversations about what's sustainable for our county, and that's one of the reasons she showed how many applications we have for each district, and that is a conversation that we want to have. We had it many times in the committee, so I'm glad you brought it up, and that is something that we collectively need to address for our county.
I definitely agree with that. We need to be looking at limiting these grows because they're coming to us saying that they can't sell their product. So why would we want to extend how much cannabis is actually grown here in the county when we can't collect tax dollars from the last year? I'm actually really just, I don't really, I guess, grasp or understand how they grew last year, was not able to sell their product, but want to grow again this year. So I guess that I have that question out there.
Yeah.
Why are we continuing if we couldn't sell our product? We can't pay our taxes.
I think the question
And I think Anita's stopping me.
That's a very good question, Supervisor. I don't have an answer to that one, but when you're talking about limits, and certainly Mary could tell you this also, the draft ordinance that we've been putting together does address that issue and the question of whether there should be limitations on permitting. So that's been anticipated, and it will be something for your board to consider, public comment, etc.
And also, sustainability is the biggest question for us. What can our environment sustain? How much water use can we sustain? What can the market sustain? And for that reason, I've asked the Cannabis Alliance to come to our board and make a presentation with their priorities and their vision so we can have that conversation directly. And that's going to be the beginning of March.
Great, thank
Great. So may I answer some questions now?
Yes.
So in terms of water, so where I come from, there is a process that every project that comes through the city, our water department looks at that project. It says that we have 100 whatever pounds of water. This project that's required to develop is going to take 10 of those. We've broken them down by sectional zoning districts. So we have so much water dedicated for residential, so much water dedicated for commercial, industrial, manufacturing. Every project that comes in, the planner analyzes those numbers and say how much is it going to take for the water usage for that particular project. So my strategy is to meet with Mariana, Department of Public Works, to kind of see where we can do with those numbers, because we know on our end from the hydrology reports how much water it's going to take, at least what the applicant is telling us, and then we need to work with the Water Resources Department to say how much water do we have and can it really sustain this water. And that's the next phase of what we're doing with the watersheds and all that stuff. So that's kind of like where staff is going, because I know that that is very important and very critical to the entire process. So that's the answer to that question. In terms of the limited number of grows, there is in the current revised ordinance where it states that we are recommending either, it's not dead and set in stone yet because we're still doing analytical work, but the reason why it was so important for us to take the GIS data and geocode it, because we had to identify the location of the grows, the size of the grows, and there was a lot of background work that we have to do to lay the basis before we can make any intelligent guesses on where we think we should go. So we can't really answer that question for you yet, but in the back of our minds, we are looking at things that we can do in terms of distance requirements, sizing of the grows, where they should be. I think I even heard one about maybe doing a lottery for these, like allowing so many, and then after that, we only have like a certain number, and then those will kind of go through a lottery format. But we have to continue our research and analyze where we have and where we are so we can determine what we can handle. So these are good questions, and that's where we're going, but we couldn't get there without doing the background research. Okay.
Thank you. Supervisor Simon and then Supervisor Sabatier, I'll let you go.
Just want to, thank you for the update as we're moving forward. As everybody knows, we got a lot of work to do. When we approved this, we knew it'd be 5 years, so we're going through that process now. But Supervisor Sabatier, like I said, Supervisor Pyska's already said, I'm glad you brought that up. The numbers conversation, what's sustainable for this in Lake County, both from our resources and also just from a community level as we move forward. I myself have talked about it a few different times, just as we have so many liquor licenses in Lake County. Looking at that from a cannabis standpoint, we want a sustainable industry with the folks that are willing to go through the process, make the hard fight right now to be sustainable and be a positive long-term business here in Lake County and do the right things. And as we move forward, those are all going to be conversations we need to have. They're not going to be easy, but it's a conversation we need to have at this point. And you see those numbers, 243 applications at this point. If you just break it down, that's about 50 projects in each district, if you break it down in a 5 number like that. But where is that fine line and where is that number? That's going to be the real in-depth conversation that we get to here as we move forward with the industry, with all the stakeholders, and here at the county level. So appreciate that you brought that up, because we have had many conversations how we move forward with this. So excited when we get there, because then we'll have that conversation done and move on with the other challenges that come with it.
Right.
Supervisor Sabatier?
Goodness, I forgot because I was listening. I'll have to get back to you. The early activations, that's why we're here. That was part A. We're talking about early activations. I don't think it needs to change now, but when it does finally come back, in my opinion, and please tell me if I'm wrong, if you don't do grading, if you don't build structures, and if you don't do all the stuff you're not supposed to do with an early activation, I believe that CEQA does have a threshold of 10,000 square feet, because I believe that's how Mendocino has allowed the 10,000 square foot process to go a little bit faster, but yet not completing the process with the CEQA analysis and all that. That would be where my threshold would be okay. We're still going to go out and let the neighbors know that this is happening and early activation is going to be provided, so at least we can get the public comment, but at least it's a small enough patch that it doesn't harm the environment, meaning the neighborhood area that it's being allowed in. It's already prescribed to be in a zone away from our communities. And at that point, compared to what we've seen before, we've had almost close to 80-acre grows be early activated, some 15-acre grows early activated. And in my opinion, that right there, it's just, you are going to have some impact to the environment at that. At a 10,000 square foot, that's a very small footprint, and I believe, again, that it is a threshold within CEQA. That's where I would feel comfortable allowing that. But again, it has to be tied to a use permit. It's not just anyone and everyone can go ahead and get that.
So actually, with the early activation permits in the criteria, it talks about projects that have adverse environmental impacts to the community. And when you look at that, we start talking or looking at the noise, the air, traffic, and all those other issues. So although it's only 10,000 square feet, it may have other impacts that we have to still look at. The issue that we're having with early activation permits is that the time it takes for staff to review those permits is almost as equal time as it takes for the use permit. If you have an early activation permit that's tied to a minor or even a major use permit, it still undergoes that same type of environmental review. I can't say at this moment that they're all exempt, because they're all individual projects. And so that's something that I would have to go back and kind of flesh out a little bit more. But early activation permits are taking about the same amount of time as a use permit. So we are advising a lot of our applicants that it's best to just apply for the use permit and go through the CEQA analysis and all the other cumulative impacts that you would need to go to in order to move the projects forward. It would actually be a faster process, because first we're doing an EA is not designed to do what a use permit does. And so EAs, from what I understand, is allow you to kind of set your property up to get ready for the use permit, but not to operate as if you have a use permit to operate a cultivation site.
And just to add a caveat, that doesn't mean you get it for an EA. It's still under the discretion of the CDD because every project is unique and every environmental impact will be different depending on where the project is, what the project looks like. To me, if there was to be an early activation, my mind is set that no more than 10,000 square feet would be where I stand. If it's less than that, then absolutely, I'm okay with that too. But I think any more than that, and at that point, you need a use permit. There will be an impact. You're starting to, especially if it's outdoor, you cannot mitigate to a certain degree the potential for the odor. You can do some stuff, but that will probably require some kind of grading or some kind of whatever other work that needs to happen in order to try to do that. Another issue that hasn't been talked about, and I just want to check in to see if it's being discussed or if there's any movement, is the fact that we, even in our projects, we approve of outdoor cultivation, but then there's nowhere for them to dry, whether it's on their property or we have very little amount of processing plants. And we talked about it during the appeal process that came to us back in November. Possibility of maybe a temporary permit, possibility of, I know that there's some issues with ag exempt permit, but maybe with our new ag commissioner, there might be a new conversation to see what's available, what's not available within the law. But I know that that is one of the major issues, is that there are not many at all dry sheds, and that means that they're doing things they shouldn't be doing within the permit that we approve of.
That's correct. So what I would like to do and recommend is that you give me the opportunity to come back and make another presentation to you regarding some of the follow-up with the questions that you have for today.
Supervisor Simon?
Just want to follow up on that conversation while we're here today and when we're talking about the early activation. And I'm glad that you bring it up, Supervisor Sabatier, because, going forward, that's a discussion this board needs to have. Is there a place for early activation, or are we really trying to get this where they get their minor use permits, their major use permits, and get these things solidified for long-term success here in Lake County? And as you heard directly from the CDD director, having those two paths has just compounded the situation where we have the backlogs. And we really need to talk about that as we go forward. When we talk about streamlining, that is a big-time conversation we're having every time we meet as we move forward. So I appreciate the conversations that are coming up today as we move forward. And I was glad to see, that there are some processing projects that are looking to apply. I know there's some real important ones that could help establish the industry here for the drying and the, everything that needs to happen, that missing tool for the industry. So hopefully as we're moving through this process, we can do that. As far as early activation, when we started, I think we had the intention to really prop up the industry the best that we could of what we knew at the time. But we've seen that it has caused, kind of like I said, a bottleneck, because they're going forward in both for the use permit and for the early activation at the same time. So it's kind of creating the double work process. And what we've also heard from our constituents and other things with early activation, it doesn't always give them the exact opportunity to come in that a use permit or a major use permit would do here, to come to the board and bring their concerns. And we know we've all heard that, and we really got to work from both sides just to establish the industry, to help it grow and establish itself here, but also to listen to those community and constituent members that have the concerns when these projects are going by them. So those are all things we're going to have to figure out between now and July. And I'm glad that we've got off to a good start having the meetings, but I'm going to obviously hear from the community here and our constituents in the industry in public input. So I appreciate the time today, and you raised some great questions as you're moving forward. Go ahead, Supervisor.
Supervisor Sabatier?
So you said July, and I get it that that was on the timeline for the revamp of the ordinance to get it all finalized. And I'm not saying I want that to happen earlier. It'll happen when it happens. But early activation, I think we can make a change rather than continue a moratorium on something that we seem to be aiming for, either absolutely limiting or eliminating. That by July, if we make that decision, then it's already too late at that point for the entire season. So I would not be against eliminating early activation in order for us to continuously focus on our use permits, knowing that that is more of a long-term gain versus the early activation, that's only a 6-month gain. So I'm just putting it out there in order for us to let the industry know that either A, it's still possible, and by July it's not possible, or that B, we're just making a decision of what it is that we want rather than continuing to postpone a decision that does impact their capabilities or not.
Thank you. Heard loud and clear.
Supervisor Pyska?
And we'll be having those conversations in the workshops in April.
Okay. So I have a question for the board. So would you like to see me back in March, or you just want to see me in April? I mean, see me back meaning with the updates of the questions that you've asked for further information about, or would we like just to handle that in the workshops?
I think that, if I may, by the time you get to the workshop, you're going to have an ordinance prepared and for proposal. I'd like to see it so that we can comment on it in case we want to make changes before that gets offered at the workshop to really get the stakeholders. That would be my preference.
She needs the month of March to finish the draft.
It could be early April.
Anita, did you have any input? I see you looking over here. I don't have my glasses on, so, okay, good. You were just looking in this direction. I thought we were wavering on something. Okay. I'm just trying to be good.
But we do hear your request, and we'll meet that on the CDD committee and make sure that we're moving forward with bringing something back to the board so we can have those discussions. We'll communicate that with Mary as we move forward, but appreciate the work that's been done to this point, and we understand the urgency.
Thank you very much.
I think, too, that...
Thank you for all your work.
Yeah. Go ahead, Supervisor Pyska.
I want to thank all the staff. I know it's been a pretty crazy year for the entire department, and the staff have really hung in there, and they've worked really hard. You've worked really hard, and we have so much gratitude for everything that you've been doing. So thank you, and please pass that on to the staff.
Will do. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Oh, I wouldn't leave yet because we still have to do public comment.
Yeah, we still need to come, but I also wanted to add one last thing.
All right.
In regards to whatever decision we come to, or with the study and the research that you'll be doing before you come back or work with is, for example, when we decide either early activation or not, in the meantime, while these projects are already essentially bottlenecked because we'll have limitations on them, in that time, maybe we can put more of an emphasis on the illicit grows with code enforcement, since the water limitations and all of the other things are in place. At least that way we can minimize that element of what's kind of putting us in this predicament as well, is the fact that some of these folks that are actually legal grows are deciding, I'll just go illicit then, and so I think that was the whole balance initially, was to try to get people away from the illicit grows to the legal grows, and so that might be something we strategize, of course, with code enforcement, and then even with us, with putting some more funding towards more officers or something like that, I don't know, but just coming up with a plan and that aspect to it.
Yeah, I think that's great. So the code enforcement officer has already been working on a strategy. So it was in my presentation. I probably didn't present it as well as he probably could have, but we are moving in that direction for illegal grows.
Okay. Well, thank you. And is there anything anybody else has? And then let's see. I don't see anybody online with their hand up. Is there anybody in the audience that has a question? Yes, it looks like we. Go ahead, come forward, and you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair Crandall. Thank you, Supervisors. My name is Erin McCarrick. I'm from Clear Lake. I am also the treasurer of the Lake County Cannabis Alliance. And I definitely want to take a moment to thank you guys for listening and having this update. Thank Anita and Carol, the tax department, and a big thanks to you, Director Darby. This information is just a present. It's amazing, and the amount of work that you've done and the time that you've been here, fantastic. Sorry, it's a weird way to look at you. There you go, fantastic. Just a couple things in terms of, and also very excited to give the presentation, not myself, but the Lake County Cannabis Alliance in March to really bridge the conversation gap that, you know, we want to make sure that you guys are aware of the impact. So just a couple things from the conversation. One of the questions about why keep growing. One of the things that I don't think we've mentioned much is the lack of dispensaries. So you can't just go to Safeway and pick up, you know, an evening edible like you can for wine or beer. So there's not enough dispensaries. So hopefully in this next year, there will be dispensaries to help meet the need of people. Additionally, I did have a question. We'll get into more of that like in the presentation, but the one question I did have was, I had a question and then a request. The question is, of the 33 early activations that are pending, where are they in the status of the process? Are they lined up to go to the Planning Commission? Are they out for CEQA? Are they at the Lake Co? Where are they? And then the request that I had was to really include anybody from the industry. It's kind of like you spend weeks and weeks, or in this case, months and months, baking a cake and then realize the recipient is gluten-free. So if somebody from the industry was helpful to, you know, bake the cake, you could avoid a lot of the pain at the end. Thank you very much.
Thank you. If you wanted to,
Oh, you want me to answer now?
yeah, probably better while
Turn
it's
backwards
fresh.
and talk to me. So in terms of the 33 projects, I can let you know where they are in terms of the early activation permits. Each individual project has its own process, and so I would have to look it up based on the project itself. So if you want to call me or email me, I can provide you with that information.
Thank you. Joan, if you'd like to come up and state your name for the record, and you have 3 minutes.
I'm Joan Moss. I represent the press, and I'm also on the Big Valley Mitigation Committee for the Groundwater Sustainable Plan. And I just want to make sure I ask some questions. I believe Mary Darby is working at your direction. I found some blame addressed to Ms. Darby for doing what she's doing. She is making this ordinance at your direction and request. If it's a mistake to spend all this time on this ordinance, it's not her fault. It's what you told her to do. And I'd also like to know who decides about the adverse environmental impacts of what is happening. Who decides what those are? And I want to make sure that you understand what she said when she's developing an environmental impact report. The research that I'm doing when I talk to different people who are concerned about water is criticism about the vineyards. The vineyards depleted the water of Lake County. But you've already established that the vineyards are agriculture and they're valuable. I believe that cannabis is not just entertainment. Cannabis is medicine. I'm just telling you that's the feedback that I get from people that I talk to. And I think the agricultural impact of all agriculture is important, not just the water hauling by the illegal cannabis growers. And many illegal cannabis growers are growing their 6 plants, and they have children, and they have animals. So how are you going to discern how they separate their water? And I know of farmers, I know of families, when the vineyards start using water, the wells of the neighboring farmers go dry. Thank you for letting me make these off the subject comments, but it's the things you need to be aware of, I believe. And I commend Ms. Darby. I understood everything she said. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, if you have an answer for, thank you.
So thank you, Ms. Moss. I just wanted to say that in terms of the adverse impacts, environmental impacts of properties, we look at that based on our CEQA guidelines and our initial study. So there is a checklist that we go through. And I can share that with you if you like.
Thank you. And then it looks like we have someone coming up to the mic.
My name is Michael Wegner. I'm a consultant working here in Lake County, Sonoma County, and Napa County, and Mendocino for cannabis cultivation. I've been here at these meetings a number of times for, well, a relatively long time now. Things in the conversation have evolved, but some things still seem very consistent. And I think one of those is what Ms. Mosk was bringing up, is we're talking as far as water uses, right? It's an important topic and it has to be addressed, but we're really only subjugating cannabis in that conversation. And as an agricultural community, it's a much bigger conversation, and a lot of other impacts or things that are being associated are not also being kept track of. So my point, I guess, is just that agriculture is now cannabis, you know, based on qualifications of 2 years as an agricultural crop. I remember when this first started, Steve, he made a very good point that it's not a commodity, it's not an agricultural crop until it's been here for 2 years. Now it's been 2 years, so it is an agricultural crop, and it would seem like has to be some kind of balance between different commodities, because that's really what they are. The other thing that I wanted to bring up was this market fluctuation that we see, and we talk about the ups and downs of markets, right? And the cannabis market is very new, which also makes it relatively unstable, okay? So it moves a lot because it's just beginning. That will eventually become less volatile because that's how markets work. So taking just this year into context, it's a very small piece of a much longer time frame. And I think you have to keep in mind that these fluctuations are going to happen, and last year was a really bad year, and for a lot of different reasons. When we talk about overproducing or producing too much cannabis, we're only talking about California right now, okay? So if we make rules that subjugate this county to a certain restriction, when it becomes federally legal, we've handicapped ourselves severely, because we have one of the best places probably in the Northern Hemisphere to grow cannabis. That could then be shipped, exported, so on and so forth. So keep in mind that it's not just the California market, it's the bigger market that will emerge. So don't handicap our small community by overriding the rules. Just something to take into account. Lastly, I think with the revamp of the laws and the rules that are going to be controlling the cannabis production, it would seem like it'd be a very good idea to have an ad hoc committee that people from the industry could be involved into, like Aaron was saying, give you insight. That was a major issue in Sonoma County when it first started. They didn't have an ad hoc committee, so they made a bunch of rules that didn't work. And because they didn't work, they had to rewrite those rules. So what they did is they brought a bunch of people from the industry, and this is like 2010, 2011. They brought in the stakeholders and got input.
Thank you. Thank you. Anybody have any? All right. It looks like we have somebody online with their hand up. Thank you for your comments on that. Phone 6205, you can state your name for the record, and you have 3 minutes.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you very much. This is Bart Levinson. I wanted to mention a couple of things. Yesterday in Mendocino, an announcement was made that water for agriculture will be limited this year due to drought. And I just wanted to make sure that our county was aware of that and what was going on in Mendocino. Also, I haven't heard, perhaps I've missed it, the study of the impact of increased truck traffic to roads is making in tearing up the roads and creating wear and tear, and particularly when it comes to mixed residential areas and areas where the roads are essential for fire evacuation and fire help. And I wanted to ask it seems to me that there is an opportunity to ask of this incoming industry to more proactively address, help, say what they can do to contribute positively in Lake County towards our shortness of housing, about our increased fire danger and fire risk. Every new project is going to take away the needed resources if there's a fire from other places that might have had more help if these new projects were not there. And I don't understand why the projects aren't being asked to be much more clear and actual in their planning for their own fire mitigation and firefighting, as well as housing.
Okay. Thank you for your comments. Does anybody have any insight on some of the questions or?
Have not heard about the impact on roads, and I don't know how easily that information would be available without having a baseline of what the roads were like prior to the increase in water trucks going around. I know that we didn't ask for that, and so I don't know if that information would be available.
Okay, thank you for that, Supervisor Sabatier.
The only thing I will update is in our use permits that are given, which are learned during the valley, there is a road impact fee as you're applying for there. It is a small set fee. I know that it is implemented. We had suspended that during the valley fire, but I know we brought that back a few years ago, so at request of our public works director. So there is a road impact fee when you do a project in Lake County. So
thank you for that, Supervisor Simon. All right. Julia Bono, you have your hand up, 3 minutes. If you can state your name for the record, and we'll go forward from there.
Yes, thank you. My name is Julia Bono. With respect to this issue, I have a very simple point to make. Our county seems more than willing to allocate scarce resources to the cultivation of grapes for wine and other alcohol-related purposes. However, this is a poison. This is a poison that has afflicted numerous communities and is not something that we should be allocating resources to. On the other hand, it kills people. It kills 2 million people a year, according to the World Health Organization. On the other hand, we have cannabis cultivation. Cannabis never having killed anyone or a remarkably small number of individuals if it has ever happened. We really should be putting this into perspective and allocating resources to the least harmful of these two intoxicants, and cannabis also being notably useful for various medicinal purposes. So I would just put my voice and vote on the side of allocating resources to the cultivation of the least harmful substance. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, I'll go ahead and close public input and bring it back to the board. It looks like this was only for a report only, and so Director Darby, thank you so much for your work. The Community Development Department, Code Enforcement, thank you for your hard work on this, and we look forward to the next time we can discuss this and get somewhere with it. Thank you again. We're going to go ahead and take a 10-minute break. We'll come back at 11:10, and it looks like we're going to move forward with.
Do you want to go into closed session?
Yes.
Okay, you probably want to read that then, and.
Yes, so I'll go ahead and read the closed session item, which is 8.2, Public Employee Appointment Pursuant to Government Code, Section 54957B1, Appointment of Public Health Officer. And with that, we will go on to break and then come back into closed session. All right. Welcome back. We're back from closed session, item 8.2, and I'll ask if there was anything that, any business coming out of closed session?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion. I would like to appoint Public Health Officer Eric McLaughlin at 80% time at step 3 on the salary scale. Upon receipt, the date of his service will start upon receipt of all documents and licensure.
Second.
So I have a motion and a second. Johanna, can you conduct the roll call?
Yep.
Johanna, do you hear us?
I think she's there. Yeah, she's there.
Okay, Mr. Chair, I'll do the roll call.
Thank you.
Can the Zoom room hear us, though, to make sure that...
Yeah, I believe so. Dr. McLaughlin, wave if you can hear us.
Yeah. Do we have sound?
Oh, I don't think we have sound.
Yeah.
It says the host would like you to unmute on that. There you go.
Oh, that's for this.
Oh, okay.
Johanna, are you hearing us?
Yes, I hear you.
Okay, so it looks like the sound was not turned on for your motion?
Okay, so I'll go back and let everyone know that we came out of closed session. Was there any business to be conducted out of closed session?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion to appoint for Public Health Officer Dr. Eric McLaughlin at 80% time at step 3 on the salary scale, and his effective date will start upon receipt of securing all documents and licensure.
Second.
So I have a motion and a second. Johanna, can you conduct the roll call, please?
Okay, Supervisor Simon,
Yes.
Supervisor Sabatier,
Aye.
Supervisor Pyska,
Yes.
I messed that up, Supervisor Scott,
Aye.
and Supervisor Crandall.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, it looks like we have Dr. McLaughlin here with us, and I'll turn it over to CAO Hutchinson, and she can introduce and move forward from that.
Yes, just want to briefly reintroduce you to Dr. McLaughlin, who you met earlier and selected for the position, and he's joining us here today from Las Vegas, where he lives. And so, Dr. McLaughlin, you want to say a few words?
Yeah. Hello, everybody, and thank you for the opportunity to crash into the meeting kind of before my official start date. Very excited to join the team and take care of the citizens, and really look forward to working with everybody. I know we've got a lot on our plate. There is a bit of a global pandemic, in case anybody hasn't heard, and really excited to be working with Mr. Portney and Ms. Hutchinson on taking care of everybody and making sure we keep this health moving forward. So thank you for the opportunity, and be seeing a lot of me soon.
Thank you.
How do you spell the name, please?
It's Eric, E-R-I-K, just because my parents had to be a little different. And my last name is McLaughlin, M-C-L-A-U-G-H-L-I-N. And it's easy to remember because it's got the word laugh right in the middle of it.
Did you pronounce that?
Thank you. It's McLaughlin. McLaughlin.
Yeah.
Yes.
Dr. Makuzalar?
McLaughlin.
McLaughlin, thank you.
There we
I
go.
thought you announced it was closed session after the break.
We came out of closed session.
just
Thank
did.
you. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry that I wasn't notified.
No worries. And I've had to wither in the past. McMuffin, which was objectionable. I tried to start McDreamy or McSteamy, and those were all rejected. So McLaughlin kind of just works well for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you.
We'll see you soon.
Yep.
Welcome.
All right.
Where do you go after that?
So it looks like we are in our non-timed items.
Do we do public input?
Oh, yeah, we would do public input for that, so that kind of seemed like it was a little bit of a public input, but I'll open it up for public input just in case. I'm not seeing anyone online, and our sole public has left the chambers for now, so I'll bring it back, and we will move on to the next agenda item. Our non-timed items. 7.2, consideration of review and reconsideration of urgency ordinance number 3108, requiring all persons, regardless of COVID-19 vaccination status, wear face coverings in county facilities. And this was brought forward by Supervisor Sabatier. Didn't know if you wanted to open up with this or...
Yeah. So as most of us know, should know, today the state has rolled back on their masking mandate. Those who are vaccinated are able to make the choice to not wear a facial covering, and those who are unvaccinated are still being requested to wear a facial covering. We had created a criteria for when, and so we have our own mandate specifically for our public facilities. I do want to kind of use the earlier public comment that said about our mandates. That is the only mandate that we currently have from Lake County. Everything else is coming from the state. And again, it only covers Lake County public facilities. This does not cover any other jurisdiction. We have a criteria that if it falls below 3.9 cases per 100,000 and testing positivity rate falls below 4.9%, that at that point we would have the discussion to take that back. I wanted to have the discussion, one, because the state is changing things, wanted to make sure and be clear on where we are and what we're doing, but also, two, I wanted to make the argument that, again, and I made the same argument before, and I'm going to provide some data to show, the criteria that we used was a criteria that was taken away entirely on June 15th of 2021. I believe that was the correct date. And it was the blueprint that had been created. During that time, that blueprint is when we saw a surge that definitely had some large impacts on our community. Then Delta came in. This was created, this blueprint, prior to vaccination and prior to Omicron. And I'm going to show you some data that, in my opinion, provides information to show that this criteria is way too restrictive for what Omicron really has been through our community. So I'm going to share my screen. We provide some data. And all of this data comes from CDPH. If you go to the state dashboard and look up Lake County and then click on data, it's a link underneath that where it shows all the information for the county. And then you can get all the raw data that they have. You type in the search lake, it'll break it down to just lake, and then you can click download. And that's exactly where I got all of this information. As you can see, this information is, if I can move it, is all on the left-hand side. I got all the cases, I got all of the deaths, and then did the 7-day average to match it up so that I can recreate the graphs that we've been seeing on our website here. And what I did on this is I decided to look at what are our surges that we've been experiencing. And so our surge 1, which, to be honest with you, I don't even know what it was called at that point other than just COVID. We saw that happening in November of 2020, and the way that I decided what a surge was when it exceeded 10 per 100,000 cases. I had to create some sort of criteria as to what a surge was actually defined as. And so it lasted 107 days, had 2,369 cases, 35 deaths, and here's the breakdown of the daily cases average, the daily deaths average, and the death rate being 35 divided by the number of cases that we knew of, and when it peaked, which was 63 days. Currently, we're on our 50th day of our surge for Omicron, so we haven't even gone through all the way to the peak of the first surge. And as you can see already, here we have half the number of deaths per day, but yet 3 times the number of cases, and the death rate from 1.5%, which is definitely not a good death rate, to 0.23%. The flu is 0.1%. There's about 6 million people that get the flu and 60,000 people that perish from the flu, giving about approximately 0.1% death rate. So this has definitely decreased a whole lot. And our peak, as far as the number of the average cases per 7 days, was in 30 days. So we've already hit the peak. We've been seeing it was a steep incline, and now it's a steep decline, as you can see in this graph here. And so you can see all 3 surges being highlighted on the graph. Again, it looks exactly the same as the graph you would see on our COVID-19 data that our public health puts up on their page. But I wanted to kind of be able to look at in a different way. And so what I did is I, again, grabbed the surge area and looked at the deaths as well. And you can see that during this 7-day death average that occurred during the first surge, that we had a huge peak in deaths. During the second surge, we had a very long, Delta really hurt. Delta was much worse for us than any of the three. And then here for Omicron, it's been very low. Again, all deaths matter. It is very personal for those that are connected, whether it's of family, whether it's friends, whether it's coworkers. I'm looking really at the data in order to really apply what are we doing about this and how does this impact us. And so again, in looking at the difference, the first surge was approximately 1.48% death rate. The second surge was approximately 1.45. We are looking at a 0.23% death rate based on the number that we have. Now, there is a caveat for Omicron is that the surge is not yet completed. We haven't dropped back below 10 cases per 100,000. So there is definitely some incomplete data to go with that. But that is the data thus far. And because the surge is not over, I decided to do some comparables so that let's look at what the first 46 days, actually that should say the first 50 days, of each of the surges looked like. And again, we have 0.89% death rate, 0.95% death rate, and then 0.23% death rate on Omicron. Again, looking at the cases, it's almost double the number of cases, but yet a whole lot lower of a death rate. If we want to look at it another way, let's normalize that so that we just look at what would the whole entire surge look like if it was 50 days. And again, you still end up with the same death rate, and you end up with less deaths and less cases overall, but you still end up with the same death rate when you normalize it by looking at the statistics of it. So I'm not going to say that everything is 100% great. 0.25 is still 2.5 times, or 0.23 is still 2.3 times harder on us than the flu is. We know the flu can be detrimental to those that are fragile, those that are elderly, but at the same time, we don't have any restrictions that are placed in our communities or in our public facilities because of those things. And I think that by using a tiered system that was created even prior to Delta, because Delta happened in the June 29th through November 15th, that we can't apply a tiered system that never even knew what Omicron was versus now looking at what is happening today with the type of virus that is the majority of the issue that we're dealing with. And so I wanted to share that with you. I think it's a drastic difference in comparison, especially when you look at the death rates. And again, yes, people are dying from COVID still today, and I'm very sympathetic to those that are experiencing that with their families and friends. But again, we have to look at this from a big picture perspective and what is it that we are doing. I'm going to share a different screen real quick. Let me actually show you the bottom of my data. And so at the bottom of the data, you'll see that right now, as of today, based on all the information that we've received, we are currently at 44.43 cases per 100,000, okay? And at 0 deaths on a 7-day average. And if I stop sharing and reshare my screen, let's not do that quite yet. Let's make sure I'm looking at the right thing. There we go. Okay, so you'll see on this screen that it says that we're at 75.5, and I just told you that we're at 44. That's because if you go on here, it's as of 2/7 of 2022. It's not as of the latest amount of information. And that's because also when you look at this and it says plus 48, that doesn't mean that 48 cases happened yesterday. It means that we're readjusting the total amount of numbers to 48 new cases, and that could be back to February 1st, that could be back to January something. It all depends when those lab results and all that data is inputted. So we can't look at that daily and say, oh my God, we have 125 new cases. It changes the entirety of some week or some days, not just one single day. And so this is data that's a bit behind. There will be new data as it's introducing. But again, you can see we are absolutely falling when it comes to our 7-day, and my mouse isn't quite following because I got something in front of my screen. But right here, you can see that we are absolutely decreasing at a fast rate. Everybody is exhibiting this. I was looking at every single county. You can look at different counties right here. Like let's say, let's look at Santa Barbara where there's more population. But there's Tulare already popped up. You see that same curve. You see Santa Barbara, you see that same curve. Everybody in the state of California is exhibiting that same growth spurt and that same huge cliff dropping off. Hence why the state of California, as of today, has drawn back their masking mandate, again, with that caveat that unvaccinated still need to mask and vaccinated can choose to. And so I want to show you this data because the question that I think that has not been answered is when. When is the death rate acceptable enough to say that, because we didn't do any of these things for the flu. And right now we're at 0.25% or lower. And I want to ask that we either A, follow what the state is asking us, is doing today, and make that same statement for our public facilities, or B, request that public health review with this criteria that I think is impossible to achieve. With Omicron, it's so infectious that we're going to see cases, and we may never reach the 3.9, and yet we haven't breached that criteria to say finally we're done. And so I think that we have to at least admit that we're using obsolete data in order to use that as a criteria. And I fought last time to try to get us to follow the CDC criteria, which is a little bit more lenient. But again, that also was created prior to Omicron. And so I just wanted to bring it to the board to see what we can do, because I think that right now we have an impossible criteria to ever meet. And we're seeing numbers that are completely drastically different than what Delta did and what the first surge did. And at one point, we have to eventually stop the things that we're doing and go back to normality. Is it today and follow the state, which is, again, your choice, or if you're unvaccinated, please be masked? Or do we continue and create a new criteria? Because in my opinion, continuing with what we have is not an appropriate way of evolving with the things that have changed for us and based on the experiences that we have. I've also spoken to both hospitals. They definitely have hit full capacity during this time, but I was also told as a caveat that even prior to the pandemic, their hospitals would be full, because that's what our hospitals are built for. They're built for the minimum amount of beds, but they didn't have the same type of surge as they did for Delta or before, where they had people in the cafeteria, where they had people going into med surge when they needed to be in ICU. And so they didn't have that same issue in comparison. We saw a huge number of cases, so that's why it helped stretch the hospitals a little bit. But now we're seeing that drastic drop, and it's going to keep dropping. And so I'm going to finish right there. I know that I did have a good conversation with Director Portney about what I was going to be bringing to the board today. I sent him all of my data. I did just update it with today's latest numbers that were made available. And I know that he shared interest in reviewing, if the board does so, in directing him to review the criteria to make sure that it makes public health sense with the new terms of what Omicron has been shown to do. And so I'll leave it there with, that was my presentation.
Thank you for that, Supervisor Sabatier, for all the numbers and for putting it out there so that we have a lot of data to compare to, if that makes sense. Vice Chair Scott, you have something to say. Go ahead.
I'm all for getting back to normal, but I don't think this is the time right now. I think my concern is if we still have employees that test positive for COVID, they're out of the workforce. And my concern would be that it goes around an office and then that whole office has to close, and then we cannot provide the services that we need to the public because we have sick employees. Honestly, I think California, with now asking for the ones that are not vaccinated to continue wearing masks, I think it's going to be a free-for-all, and the masks are going to come off across the board, just like we saw back June 15th, where we know we have a very low vaccinated rate. But when June 15th came, nobody was wearing masks anymore. And I would almost have to say those that you did see wearing masks were probably vaccinated because they wanted to protect themselves and their family. So at this point right now, I don't see masks being that big of a deal. I think we need to be protecting our employees, making sure we can provide services, and we may need to go back and look at our matrix and see how we can change those, but I don't think it's time for the masks to come off.
Thank you, Vice Chair Scott. Supervisor Pyska, you have your hand up.
I think this has always been an issue about productivity and making sure that we can keep our doors open and keep our staff in place. And we have had big segments of departments being sent home and sick and recovering and quarantined, and that's stopped a lot of our work dead in the tracks. I think, we do need to look at this, and luckily we've just hired a public health officer who his job is to help guide us on this and take that responsibility off of us and help bring that data to us to be helpful so that we can make decisions going forward. But this isn't, we've been winging it for a long time with Dr. Pace being part-time, and now that we have a dedicated PHO, I really look forward to working with him. I look forward to hopefully him being at our next board meeting. One of the things, Supervisor Spatier, you and I've talked about, and we talked about it with Dr. Bloom, is when you have a percentage, and I don't know exactly what it is currently today in our hospitals, a certain diagnosis taking up, say, 30% of your beds, that's too high. What is a reasonable number of COVID patients taking up our hospital space? That needs to be looked at too. So I think that public health and our new PHO can work on what the new matrix looks like for post-Omicron. But I actually reached out to 7 department heads. That's kind of all I had time. I picked the department heads that interact mostly with the public, and they all are not ready. They are experiencing a lot of interfacing with the public. So they're concerned about their staff who do that. They're concerned, like the library, they're concerned if we don't have masking in the library, then a lot of people won't come to the libraries. We do have one of our departments that's been hit very hard in the last 2 months, still has employees testing positive and really fears that without masking, then they're going to have more COVID spread within their department. I know people are tired of wearing masks, and I did hear that from one department head, and that's the reality. We're all tired of it. I think a little bit while longer. I think waiting for our new PHO, figuring out, what is going to be what are those thresholds? We have a very, very low vaccination rate within our staff, lower than the county, much lower than the state, and that needs to be factored in too. But the big thing I heard loud and clear from those directors, I can't afford to lose staff right now. I just can't. Those are my thoughts. I think we should wait. I think we have an opportunity with Dr. McLaughlin, and I'm really looking forward to his leadership in this department.
Thank you, Supervisor Pyska. Supervisor Simon?
I just had a question for you, Supervisor Sabatier. I know you said you picked up all your information from the state website, and we're always talking about equity and inclusion. Did you reach out to Tribal Health to look at our Native community numbers?
No, I did not.
So once again, not only at the state level, but even here at our own county level, the Native communities that are located here are once again just left obscure. You know, they're not data, and it's disappointing. We talk about equation, you know, inclusion and equality. We did the Black History Month today, but once again, you know, the Native folks that are being affected here in our local government, which, yes, we don't sit and represent on the boards. They have their own tribal nations and things, but once again, left out as non-data. It's disappointing to hear words of we want to be inclusive, we want to take everybody in, but then when you look up and you put up the California data, the Native people and the indigenous ones that are here first aren't even included. And it's done right here at this board level. It's all just words, and it's backed up once again, and it's disappointing. You know, we're in a real challenging position. I have always been trying to represent everybody, as I said on this board, and look how we move forward. But it's disappointing to hear that you didn't even reach out and check on our Native communities when you're talking about getting the right data, because that's not being inclusive, because it isn't the right data. The Native communities at this point in Lake County are being affected more than any community. I don't have to look at the data to understand that we're a vulnerable community. We have been since the inception of this country, and it continues to be that way. But that's not just why I sit here on this board, but inclusion is something we talk about. We go to trainings, we do all those things, but I guess it's just words. My concern going forward is the real challenge. I've said it here before, and many times, trying to educate the public and understand where we're going. We're in a tough spot as a board. The state lifting the mandates, obviously, on the masking, people are going to make their own choices, their own decisions as we move forward. I do agree with looking at the data, but I also see you know, the writing on the wall. We're always trying to protect our workforces, make it as safe as possible, but the day is coming that people are going to make their own decisions. Just because the mask mandate for myself goes down, I still am going to do what I can do to protect my family and my community members and wearing my mask. Ultimately, as this board, when we make a decision either to go with the state rules or come up with a different metrics that we're going to be looking at as a community, you know, I'm willing to go either way at this point right now with the honest decision. I appreciate you bringing it, but I really got to talk about that inclusion conversation, because without the data of the Native folks here, I just want to drive it home, especially since trainings we're just going through now of taking in everybody's account is really important. I just can't stress that enough, how important that is. And so at this point, for me, I want to do everything I can to protect our workforce, our individual communities, but we know that we've already had a problem here, even at the county level, with our mandates in of people wearing masks. People have made their decisions on what they're doing, making sure that it's happening all the time, and the enforcement thing is real challenging. So if there was a motion on the floor today to move forward, I would probably go with the state mandates. I really would. So,
and I'm only talking about following the state. I'm not talking about ignoring the state. That would be, my job is to create law. Our job is to create law. And if I'm going to skirt and say certain laws I don't want to follow, then I shouldn't expect anybody to follow the ones we make. So I'm only talking about what we have currently, which is set with the criteria to look at the data from the state, which is why I looked at the data from the state. And did not purposely ignore, and it should be added in there, and unfortunately we can't even get our VA to be added as well, let alone our tribal members to be added in those total numbers. But our criteria is based on what we see on our public health website, which is coming directly from CDPH, and so I wanted to have a comparable to what it is that our criteria was made for. But again, not asking for anything more than just the state mandate or what we have now, and wanted to bring up the conversation for the fact that today things are changing outside of this facility, and wanted to have that conversation.
Supervisor Pyska.
Just going to mention that when the state masking mandate went into effect, our numbers were very low. We always follow, well, not all, we didn't, with Delta, we were leading the way. But, you know, we weren't at a place then when our numbers were very high, and we were actually kind of flirting with the opportunity of getting to those thresholds right in the beginning of Omicron as it surged throughout the state. And let's be honest, how did that state mandate affect our county? It didn't. People did what they wanted to do, so I don't see how this day, what the state's doing, should dictate what we're doing. I think we need to look at our numbers, and I think getting a different threshold from public health is the right direction, and giving our new PHO the chance to offer that support and leadership.
Thank you, Supervisor Pyska, and thank you for this dialogue. I appreciate everyone's insight into this. I look at also another thing to add, because a lot of people like to talk about mandates and ordinances, and there was an ordinance that was done for businesses and fines, and I know, we get heavily scrutinized for that. However, it's sunsetted, so it doesn't exist anymore. So I don't know if anyone thinks that Ordinance 3073 is still in effect, but it is not. It has sunsetted as of August of last year, I think, or September. So that mandate, if you will, which isn't, it's just an ordinance that specifies a fine listing, is gone. So not only does that not exist, we always talk about how hard it is to recruit and retain employees. And before this, I know in my mind, I always thought about things like, how can we make this place a more lucrative place for people to want to work despite getting paid really good? One of the things that this whole pandemic has brought to us is working from home. That in some instances helps people that have children, that have limitations. Some people that have the freedom to not want to get sick. And then we also, as a board, during times specific to this pandemic, have desired our employees to come back to work, putting us in a position to kind of almost contradict what we wanted to do. And so I think when we discuss further, we need to really look at how, not only with the pandemic in mind, but also how we're going to ensure that we keep people here and we provide a safe place for people to work. Because if we do go with the mandate, or not a mandate, if we go with the state's directives, there's still going to be people that say, I don't want to get sick. They could wear masks, but what if they don't want to be enclosed in a room with someone they know is not vaccinated and is not careful and doesn't care? That's also us putting them, or them putting themselves, or however you want to label it, in a position to become sick. So those are just some things I think of. I also think of, if we decide to keep an order in place for our workplace or county buildings, if the state lifts and we keep one going, if we will allow a man about a gate to come to us and sue us, I'm sure there's going to be people that are going to come to us about this mask mandate. So I know Anita's looking at me because I'm bringing up something else, but I'm just giving you an example of, if we keep this in place and the state lifts, what's going to take place. So, Vice Chair.
I guess my question would be, after today, the state mandate's lifting, the courts are still going to be requiring masking, correct? So we're still going to have the fourth floor mandating masking. So I think we need to be also looking at that. How is security going to be deciphering if you're going to a county building, going to the courts, where you're actually going when we're talking about this building that we're in?
Thank you. That helps my question.
So I checked with the courts yesterday, and the court executive officer told me that they still plan to require masking in the court facilities for the time being, she said.
Okay.
And just to remind all of us that on June 15th, when the masking was taken away last time, the courts also still remained with masks. So it's something that they had to deal with once before, and I'm sure that if it was approved to move along to go with the state, that it would be possible to figure it out.
Can we get a recommendation from public health?
Yes. Jonathan, are you, he's right there, there we go. Jonathan, if you'd like to join the conversation, we look forward to any type of insight you would have.
Yeah, very fruitful conversation. And, I think that we're not alone in our ambition to seek understanding. It seems like oftentimes when we're dealing with the federal and state expectations, it takes a little bit of time to get to us. But actually, I will say that it's going to be beneficial to ensure that, the best practices that we put in place for our county and workforce is going to set a positive example for the health outcome of the greater county. People are looking at the health department and, the Board of Supervisors for leadership, which they continue to provide. Putting the recommendation based on evolving events regarding mandates, expectations around masking and various forms of shelter. I would like to receive a document around desired expectations moving forward from the Board of Supervisors for the Department of Health to be able to consider to ensure that it is in line with the California Department of Health and Center of Disease Control expectations, so that we are ensuring our standing certification for our public health department and for the county's population health.
Thank you. Does anyone have any other comments, concerns, recommendations? If not, I can go ahead and open this up to public input. See, we have some hands. Do we have anyone in the boardroom? No? Okay. The first hand we have up, Julia Bono. Unmute and please try to keep it to 3 minutes.
Hello, my name is Julia Bono. I have a background in scientific research. While I think masks can be helpful in some, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
While I think masks can be helpful in some very specific instances and should remain a personal choice, I strongly oppose mask mandates in county facilities or elsewhere, because a free society organized on the basis of the rights and welfare of its citizens should never inflict such an emotionally devastating policy upon its own people under the guise of protecting public health, especially when some valid scientific debate still exists as to whether or not they are actually effective in preventing the spread of the SARS-CoV-2 virus that is so minuscule it could easily pass through a standard mask. The stain of forced masking will forever live on in our memories as an unparalleled and unequivocal moral abomination this board should not continue to endorse. In my view, a society or public institution that mainstreams such abuse does not deserve to exist. I also wish to inform the board of some of the very significant harms inflicted on the physical and mental health of humans by the forced wearing of face masks. First of all, they cause physical discomfort. Wearing masks is extremely uncomfortable to many people, including children, especially those forced to wear them for 7 to 8 hours or more each day. Additionally, people can experience irritation or infections from face masks, as well as discomfort from the lack of oxygen and the difficulty or straining of routine breathing through face masks that obstruct free airflow. Second, they amount to emotional abuse. Mask mandates leave many, and I'm talking about mandates here, leave many people feeling emotionally abused. This is both from the masking being forced upon them despite all the mental and emotional distress it causes, in other words, abuse, and from the constant manipulation and cruelty that is characteristic of self-righteous abusers that results from the implementation and enforcement of mask mandates. In addition, they cause a sense of helplessness. Being at the mercy of the arbitrary and capricious whims of others makes humans feel a sense of helplessness. This is extremely stressful and grueling and can eventually break a person mentally and emotionally. Furthermore, they ruin human interactions. The quality and nature of social interactions is greatly reduced. Every interaction behind masks is fundamentally different from those without masks. Interacting in this way can feel sad, despondent, isolating, cold, and/or cruel, among other things. This is devastating to the human psyche and also causes intrinsic emotional distress due to having their social, intellectual, and mental development compromised as a result. Furthermore, they increase the stress and difficulty of communicating. The frustration that comes from difficulty communicating is underappreciated and tends to have people feeling annoyed, frustrated, and stressed. Humans have a great need for functional and efficient communication and are harmed by mask wearing because they feel they cannot learn from or communicate effectively with others. They also change your personality over time. Face masks are a radical and unnatural impingement on normal physical, mental, and emotional functioning among humans. Over time, this can change your personality.
You can wrap up your last comments, please.
Less outgoing, more suspicious, decreased tendency or desire to be kind, and so on. I have considerably more to say, but I'm not able to say it at this time due to the time constraint.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And just to remind you, the only thing that's enforced is in county buildings, and the ordinance again has never really even no fines came to fruition. So again, I think the stress level on that should be very limited. So anyhow, next person I think that has their hand up, Carlos Bono. You have 3 minutes.
Hello.
We can hear you, but it's echoing.
One moment, please. Can you hear me now?
It's still echoing.
Turn the other mic off.
Yeah.
They have 2 mics on in the house.
Is it okay now?
Yep.
There you go.
Okay, I want to, before I continue with Julia Bono's text, I want to just remind everyone that every box that contains these masks that are, used, they explicitly say that they will not prevent COVID-19. So first of all, if the masks are useless, why bother? Second, why impose any kind of restrictions on people that are unvaccinated when the vaccine does not prevent infection and does not confer immunity? That's just absurd. Anyway, I will continue with Julia's text. Masks turn some people into abusive tyrants. Mask mandates have turned a subset of people into cruel and vicious individuals who abuse people they have power over. These might include teachers, security guards, and other overzealous individuals who incoherently screech at the sight of an unmasked person anywhere on the horizon. They give people the feeling that other people matter more. The idea that I don't matter is a distinct form of distress in addition to demonstrating a lack of fairness in society that is amplified considerably when other people matter. This is what people who are systematically disregarded tend to feel, and it is very painful. This is definitely not the sort of lesson you want your constituents getting. Masks result in distress from constant harassment. Mask mandates are a constant intrusion into people's personal lives that leaves them feeling exasperated and making comments like, just leave me alone already, or just let me live in peace. It is a basic human need to not be constantly harassed by others. Kids are also very stressed from the evil mask compliance enforcer teacher, constantly haranguing them to keep their masks on all the way. Masks sap the joy from a variety of activities. Being forced to wear a stifling mask and not being able to show or see facial expressions of other humans has a tendency to reduce the enjoyment that people derive from various social activities. Masks cause people to live in perpetual stress from social enforcers. Inevitably, people opposed to mask mandates will not be particularly zealous about following them strictly, whether it be letting the mask slide down their face, taking it off for a few minutes here and there to breathe, or just munching on snacks. These people suffer from the baseline stress of constantly having to be alert for the masked police, whether they're actual police or just really annoying individuals or teachers who scream at mess people like maniacs. Masks cause the trauma of public humiliation. Masked police are often extremely zealous despite a lack of any overwhelming scientific basis for the efficacy of masks against the spread of a minuscule virus that can easily penetrate them. A person who won't or can't adhere to the inhumane mask requirements getting dressed down in public is now sadly a common occurrence. Public humiliation can be a traumatic experience, especially for little children who can internalize very negative ideas about themselves as a result. Anyway, this is Carlos Bono. Thank you very much.
Comments. Your 3 minutes is expired. Okay. Thank you. It looks like nobody else in the Zoom room has comments, so I'll close the Zoom room. And it looks like, do we have somebody from, yes, if you can come to the microphone and state your name, and I'll give you 3 minutes.
Hi, Michael Green. I don't know which hat I'm wearing today, but I did want to raise, I appreciate the comments. I think it's one thing to just follow the state mandate. It's also another thing to ask if the state mandate makes sense. The idea that they're flipping the switch and saying unvaccinated people are still required to wear masks indoors and having any faith that that's actually going to happen is to ignore the reality that we've been living with for the last 2 years. I, for one, do not personally believe that the state policy makes sense. I'm not in any big rush to follow it. I know we're going to change at some point, and there is some need to change our masking policy. For the county work sites in particular, I say now is not that time. Having said that, I do know somewhere between 2 years ago and what we call normal and where we're at now, we need to carve some new ground. And I think the state is just plowing ahead toward flipping a switch and going back to whatever we were before and calling that normal. I think there's a new normal that we have not explored. And the ask I'm suggesting today is, knowing that COVID's going to be moving into this endemic phase from the pandemic phase, knowing that it's still going to cause risks in our county workplaces and in our schools, what can we do to be proactive, not wait for the latest, greatest state wisdom or the CDC wisdom? How can we be proactive instead of reactive? And my suggestion is to take a look where we're at with our COVID-19 policy, which right now is an add-on to our injury and illness prevention program, and explore whether we can have a follow-up to that, what would be an aerosol transmissible disease policy that would basically be a complement to the COVID-19 emergency protocols while they're in effect, but would eventually replace that. And the reason I'm suggesting that is I'm not ready to take my mask off, and I know a lot of people are not. And whether it's cold or flu season or a more serious disease like COVID, how do we protect people in the workplace? We can enshrine in a permanent policy many of these very common sense things that happen. Maybe we won't mandate masks, but I want the right to wear a mask voluntarily in the workplace. Social distancing, physical distancing in the workplaces. Increased ventilation. Many of the things in our emergency protocols are very doable, very practical, are not onerous in any way. And if we put it on ourselves to draft a permanent ATD policy that would keep all of our workers safe from aerosol transmissible diseases, we can get ahead of the CDC, we can get ahead of the state and say, we know where we want to go. We have a kinder, gentler, permanent policy that is going to address the spread of aerosol transmissible diseases. Maybe it would take an ad hoc committee, something like that. But I think we have enough power in the county to address that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Green. I appreciate it. Supervisor Pyska?
I believe that CAO Hutchinson reached out to some other counties and did some research on what other counties are doing.
And,
Yes, that's correct.
Let me close public input. Well, yeah, that's okay, but I'm closing public input, so go ahead, CEO Hutchinson. Go ahead.
Okay. Yes, I participate in a web platform where other counties comment on what they're doing, and so a handful of counties were commenting on it late last week and early this week. And so just to give you a sampling, in Yolo County, they said that they have a vaccine mandate in place for all county employees, so it's really a non-issue with the state lifting the order because all of their employees are vaccinated, so they don't have to mask. They said for the public, they asked the public to sign a self-attestation form to certify that they are vaccinated, and if they do so, then they're allowed to enter without a mask. Monterey County is basically in the same situation as we are with our, what they have in place is an ordinance in county facilities only. Orange County has most of their workforce remote. They, so it's not an issue for a lot of employees. They said that they are on they're in the remaining 10 months of a pilot project where their employees are largely remote. And so as far as the public is concerned, they do have the public sign a self-attestation form regarding their vaccination status. In Butte County, both the public and employees are asked to sign a self-attestation form regarding their masking status, and obviously if they're vaccinated at this point with the change at the state level, they would not have to mask. They also said that if someone refuses to sign a self-attestation form, then they would be required to mask. And in Napa, they are allowing visitors in county facilities to be maskless, and they're requiring employees to do the self-attestation form.
But Mendocino County is staying with their countywide mandate, is that correct?
I believe so. Mendo didn't comment specific to this little survey, but I have not heard of any changes in Mendocino.
Thank you for that. That actually solves the liability portion that I was concerned about earlier. If there were self-attestation forms, that way we can limit liability in some instances as well.
And there would be a workload associated with that for sure, but that is one way other counties are managing. And as I mentioned earlier, I also contacted our courts that share our facility with us, and they said no change in their masking requirement for the time being, despite the fact that the governor is lifting the order. I thought they would go with the state guidance. And then just one other small FYI in terms of the positive cases we're seeing among our employee ranks. Just since this week, I believe I've seen 9 positive investigations, meaning that employees are still getting COVID. And of those 9, 2 were clusters of employees in same departments. So we do teeter on the edge of being operational, depending on which department it is.
All right. Thank you for that. Do we have anything else to go ahead, Supervisor Sabatier?
I just want to add to the conversation the tools that we have at our disposal. Nobody is forcing anybody to not wear a mask, no matter what direction we choose to follow. And also, we also have the vaccine that's available to us. I'm looking again at the same data at the state of California, where out of all of the cases that we had just in the month of January, 1.7 million cases, 14.5% of those were boosted, 43% were vaccinated, 42.5% were not vaccinated. It changes as we move on to hospitalizations, where 9.8% of hospitalizations were boosted, 32.6% were vaccinated, and 57.6% were unvaccinated. And then when it goes to deaths, it keeps going in that same direction. 6.4% were boosted, 26.2% were vaccinated, and 67.4%. And so I think that we also have to recognize the tools and the capability to be able to be protected as well. Nothing is ever going to be 100% similar to a seatbelt, but there's definitely tools out there to be able to provide us the greater level of safety. Just wanted to make sure, because vaccinations were brought up, and I just want to make sure that we have the right data in front of us as to how they are impacting us and protecting us.
So where do we go from here? What kind of direction do we want to?
So my goal today was to have the conversation. Again, I gave 2 options. Obviously, I think option A is not something that the rest of the board is looking forward to doing. But option 2 is our criteria is not evolved, has not evolved with what we're dealing with currently. Looking at the percentages that were done even before Delta and definitely before Omicron, I think need to be regarded, updated, and reviewed by public health, not by us. Last time, I just randomly brought up that we used a tiered system because I didn't want to just make up a thing, but at the same time, there was no public health reason to use exactly that blueprint that was months before had been obsolete and canceled. And I think that we do need to have something more evolved with what we're dealing with, and that way we have a criteria that we can actually meet, because creating a goalpost that we can never reach is also not exactly an appropriate way to tell people that we are looking forward to doing this when we're creating a goalpost that doesn't allow us to get to that.
Did you?
Yeah, and we now have a really solid public health team that can help us get through this and help us develop that criteria.
Supervisor Simon?
And I definitely would agree, looking at that matrix. You know, the one thing that has always bothered me about the state is per 100,000, and we know, I'd like that number adjusted to the, you know, the 67,000 or so that we have in the county. So when you're talking about getting it to accuracy and making sure those goalposts meet our needs here in the county, I think that's definitely critical to do, because that 100,000, that doesn't make any sense for us, because we don't even have that many people here in the county. So, you know, small things like that, I definitely agree, and we are moving there, because people do want to be able to make their own decisions. We want to judge that, and we don't want to just come to a decision where, just like the state did, oh, just today we're going to do it. We want to look at that data, because going down the road, knock on wood, it doesn't happen again, but we need to be prepared if it does, so.
And I'm glad that you brought that up, because the state is actually using the wrong numbers. They're still using our 2010 census numbers for population and not our 2020. That wasn't finalized until about 2021, but if you look at the state data, the raw data, it's using 64,000 and some odd number of people, and we know that we're at 68,000 and some odd number of people, which means that our per 100,000 cases are elevated by 3 or 4 points, which can make a difference when we're looking at 3.9, right?
So it looks like we would like to allow public health to delve into this a little further before we make any type of recommendations or mandates or anything like that. Well, I mean, I don't even like that word, because we've never really tried to mandate anyone, really. But yeah, I think we have a consensus to do that. And Director Portney, you have your hand up.
Yeah, it'd be a true honor to collaborate on this and ensure the safest way. And I just want to express that, you know, as a health department, we want to ensure to the best of our ability, in partnership, the health and safety of the community at large, to ensure that the systems that are currently in place are supported. You know, whether that be hospitals, schools, jails, county, even small business. You know, we have a lot of work to do, but, you know, as you indicated, we have a fearless health department and community leaders who are ready for the task. So we look forward to working with you to find valuable solutions so we can move forward. Thank you.
All right. Supervisor Sabatier.
I'm curious, the timeline so far that I've heard has been, in my opinion, looking at maybe March 1st, and again, we don't even know 100%. We're hopeful that we can get our PHO started by March 1st, but that's going to depend on the state signing off on things for us to finalize that process. February 28th, I know the governor is talking about school masking mandates. Maybe that will change, maybe that will not. They will review it. That is the exact wordage that has been provided. And so I'm just curious, can we request for this to come back to us faster than waiting for something that may not happen by March 1st? I feel like and I get it, we don't have a PHO, and that's been one of our issues, but at the same time we do. We have Dr. Pace, we have Charlie Evans that can provide some assistance. We have Jonathan Portney, who's very dedicated to the health of our communities. Just kind of curious if we can move that timeline to be a little bit ahead of the game rather than being behind.
Our next meeting's on the 1st.
And I'd love to have it on the 1st, but again, if our PHO starts on the
Right.
1st, then we won't have anything to review until that gets accomplished.
I really think we need a PHO to help craft this. So I don't know. I have a hard time putting a time limit right now on it, since we really don't know, you know, what our timeline looks in the future. Just ASAP, you know, as soon as we get all the players in place.
If it has to go to the second meeting in March, I'm fine with that too. I mean, there is urgency on this, but we have also waited so long to have a PHO. I think making any decisions and building this out without him, it was counterproductive.
I agree.
And does that mean that, I mean, Dr. Pace is our PHO, and it's not like he has to draft it, he just has to review it to make sure that it has public health support, but on paper, we still have a PHO.
Yeah, well, they can continue to work on it. I mean, I think we're giving the direction right now to start working on it, and we have most of the players and most of the pieces in place. And the current PHO can give, can collaborate on that too. We just start the process, but I would hate to adopt something if we don't have our PHO, our new PHO, giving his approval on that. I think the work can start. Work can start today.
Dr. Pace is also working full-time at a couple, it's a total of full-time at a couple of different locations. Prior to recently, he did have 1 day a week he was dedicating to Lake County Public Health. He no longer has that 1 day a week, so I honestly don't know how much availability he has, although he is helping us meet the technical requirement of having a public health officer.
And Dr. Evans, is he still with us, or?
Very part-time. Dr. Evans also works full-time in an emergency room setting, and so more limited than Carrie Pace.
So are we looking at the second week or the first week? Or just
I agree
whenever?
with Tina, putting a date on it as soon as possible. The PHO obviously is going to be starting on the 1st, so, we are given directive to start working on it now, so get the work done that can be done and be prepared for that conversation. So that's my thoughts on it.
Excellent. Okay. Excellent, meaning that I think we have a consensus as to what we'll go forward with, so we can move on forward on the agenda. So thank you for this topic of discussion. Would it be safe to say we can bring this back on the first agenda just to see if we're anywhere with it, and then push it back a week, or should we just let it sit and wait?
I think we need to wait. I think
if the first is Dr. McLaughlin's first day, then that's problematic.
Right.
If he's able to start earlier, which he may, we don't know, then we could have that conversation on the 1st. But if the 1st is his first day, then I think we have to wait.
All right.
But I think we just commit to doing this within the first 2 weeks of March, as soon as possible.
You could also just continue the item, and if there's no new information, because of the doctor's status, it can just continue until they have the information, and that way demonstrate the commitment to get back to the discussion.
I think it's safe to say right there. We can do that. All right. So we'll close this item, 7.2, and move forward to it's 12:23. Do you think we can finish these, or should we take a lunch break?
finish them.
Finish them? Okay. 7.3, discussion and possible renegotiations of certain provisions of agreement approved on September 28, 2021 with RCHDC. B, discussion and direction on audit for financial activity regarding loan and loan forgiveness regarding Collier Avenue project. And this, Supervisor Sabatier.
So this was continued from last time. I'm not going to do another presentation like I did last time. I know this was on the Oversight Board's agenda. That was continued for the next agenda. No action was taken. And so, to be honest, I'm not 100% quite sure what to do at this point. I do feel that the Oversight Board has the right topic of conversation now, rather than just a ratification of what we approved, because their approval should be what we ratified rather than the opposite. But at the same time, I want this project to move forward, and so it's somewhat of a quagmire to figure out the best way to move forward. And I know that this is what's being offered for the Oversight Board, and I guess want to offer it up, that I am questioning our ability to forgive the loan, and I think there's enough evidence to say that that should not have happened in that order of operations the way it did. But I want this project to move forward because housing is so important. I know that it's possible to do this, but what if we set aside until the decision of the oversight board was done, the $626,000, whatever the other $120, forget the exact amount, and I apologize for that, I haven't opened anything in front of me, so that we can say, hey, look, this is right here, let's let the oversight board make a decision on what to do, and then we can move forward with the project, because I do not want to halt the project. That is a bonus for our community if we can move it forward. So I guess that's my only offer that I can put in front of you.
Ms. Grant?
I understand that it can be frustrating when something gets continued. This was a noticing issue, so it wasn't substantive that caused the oversight board to have to continue. There was simply no meeting yesterday because of the noticing issue, so it wasn't continued as to this item. The entire meeting had to be continued, which is significant in that this item's not being pushed, is what I'm saying. I think that at the next meeting, there will be a substantive discussion. I know that I've provided a review to the board, to the oversight board, with some suggestions or considerations that they can make. I believe that the developer entity has their own suggestions with regard to this. My point in saying all of this is I think that the matter is still in flux from the oversight board in terms of how they believe their authority works and what decisions they might make, which would impact conceivably anything that your board might do at this point. So again, while I understand it's frustrating to continue things, I think taking things in order may be advisable here.
Thank you, Ms. Grant. Supervisor Simon.
Yeah, and I was just going to report, obviously, the same thing, that we had to continue it. So the meeting has been moved to, the next RDA meeting is February 28th. And really appreciate the help with Anita, but there were some questions asked. So we have pushed that, we have scheduled that. We'll make sure that it is noticed all the way through, and we'll hopefully, as we said, have that substantive discussion on that day as we move forward. So that's where we are right now.
All right, so it'd be safe to say we can move this agenda item as well to the first and go from there.
Yes, the RDA board meets the 28th, so hopefully there will be something substantive for the first.
Seeing all sorts of heads nod yes, so that's good. All right, so close that item, move on to 7.4.
I think we need to open up to public, though.
Oh, yeah, see, I'm sorry about that.
Okay, I'll keep going into
I
it.
get autocratic sometimes, I guess, right? I'll bring the public input, see if there's anybody that's, and then there's nobody in the room jumping up, and I don't see anybody on, there we go. Nope, nobody in Zoom, so I'll bring it back to the board, and we'll move on to item 7.4.
Mr. Chair, would you consider a short break?
Yes, I think we can handle that in about a 5-minute break. Does that work?
Thank you.
All right, well, 5-minute break, so 12:35. We're ready, yes. All right, welcome back. It's 12:35. We're getting back into our meeting. We're going to take up...
We need to unmute the boardroom again.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but it looks like it's on mute.
Oh, yeah, it is.
There it goes. There you go.
All right, welcome back. We're going to go ahead and move on to our closed session. Item 8.2, public employee appointment pursuant to Government Code Section 54957B1.
8.1.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry. I read the wrong one. It's 8.1. Conference with legal counsel, decision whether to initiate litigation pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9D4, one potential case. This item is closed session, and so we will go into closed session. And what time do you think we'll be coming out of it?
1 o'clock.
About 1 o'clock. So we will be going into closed session, and we'll see you back here at 1 o'clock.